You're live.
Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to the Brookline School Committee meeting, the first one in 2022, January 6th. And we have lots of guests here, so this is great. Welcome everybody. And I'm sorry we're a few minutes late. We were in a prior meeting, so apologies for that. So I think we will start, and I will turn it over to Dr. Guillory.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. This evening, we're actually going to start with our Spotlight on Excellence. This evening, we have two student groups to recognize with the Spotlight on Excellence Award. The Baker School Student Initiative for Menstrual Products and the Brookline High School 2021 Boys Varsity Soccer Team. Our first group is the student group from Baker. Last spring, this group of students began meeting with Principal Lewis to advocate for equitable access to menstrual products at the school. Their steadfast advocacy is impressive, and I would like to yield the microphone to Principal Lewis now, who will introduce the students so that they can speak to you about their work. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Dr. Guillory. You basically took some of the words out of my mouth with how I was going to introduce them. So there's 11 students here total. They're now in grade 7. They started meeting with me when they were in grade 6, in the spring of last school year. So I'm going to have them each talk about their initiative to bring equitable access to menstrual products at Baker School and where we are now with that. They are a very dynamic and talented group of students, and I'm looking forward to them speaking to everyone about what they've been working on for the last several months. And to kick us off is going to be Chora Bayer, I'm sorry.
Hi, my name's Chora, and I'm going to talk about how this all got started. So I had gone to originally something called an hour of action where my friend who goes to a different school showed me, and she had organized it so it was through Zoom with a bunch of other people, and she had presented a slideshow called A Menstruation Conversation. And she had talked about a lot about period poverty and how it's when people who menstruate don't have access to the products or can't even sometimes afford them. And it's a bigger problem than a lot of, I mean, I don't feel like it's talked about enough, and it's a pretty big problem. And that made me thinking that we don't have enough in the Baker bathrooms, and we have to walk all the way to the nurse's office just to get a pad or a tampon, and then walk all the way back, and that's like a whole 5 minutes, and it's really upsetting. And there was a part where you could take action, and I decided to click on the link with a petition on change.org and the name is Make Feminine Products Free and More Accessible in Schools. And I had shared it with my teacher and my class, and that's basically how this whole group basically formed.
Very good. All right, we have Carmen. Thank you, Chora. We have Carmen to go next. Carmen Infantine.
Hi, I'm Carmen Infantine, and I think that I speak for everyone when I say we're very grateful that Mr. Lewis decided to let us talk at this Spotlight on Excellency. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about our advocacy work for how we really push to get this idea through and make it a reality. And as Chora mentioned, there was a petition, and we shared it with our peers and our teachers and our family and friends, and we had a lot of supporters, and it was really nice. And another thing that we did was I kind of had this thing, and we organized a thing that we did to spread awareness about the topic, and we all wore red, and you might notice that we're all wearing red right now, and that's kind of as a tribute to one of the original things that we did together. And it was just a really cool experience to be able to do it with all these amazing girls and to have the support from our principals and the whole superintendent and everything. And it was just a really cool thing that we did.
Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Carmen. Very good how you outlined that. The next group is going to be Chelsea, Remy, and Mira talking about how, how they felt about everything and the situation several months ago.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Allen. We felt it was necessary to have feminine hygiene products easily available in the school's restroom. Like Chora said before, you had to walk all the way to the nurse to get it. And sometimes someone else would be at the nurse and it would be awkward to share personal information in front of them. We also felt it was extremely necessary to have feminine hygiene products available in the all gendered restrooms, because sometimes someone may not identify as female, but still need menstrual products. So we want to be supportive of those people. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Remy. So we all felt there needed to be a change in like the way students received menstrual products at school. And just like Chora and Chelsea said, right now we have to like walk to the school nurse's office to get them, and it takes some time. And it's not as convenient as what we are planning to do now as a district. We wanted to make it easier and more comfortable for people. And after planning on what to do to help solve this, we were really determined to achieve our goal.
Hi, my name is Mira Jogi Koma, and I feel that it's really important to have feminine hygiene products in schools because a lot of us are getting our period for the first time, and for a lot of us, it can be kind of overwhelming to have it start in the middle of the school day. So we shouldn't have to feel totally unprepared if it happens suddenly. Instead, we should feel a little bit of support from getting feminine hygiene products available and accessible in the bathrooms.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to have hear from Zoe, Zena, and Samaya.
Hi, I'm Samaya Williamson, and we thought that it was necessary to not only have feminine hygiene products given from the teachers in the nurse's office, but to also have them accessible to our own, because it is very uncomfortable, like Chelsea and Chora and Carmen and Remy and Mira, like all of them said, it's very uncomfortable walking all the way to the nurse's office, including if it's like your first time, because you kind of just want to have that to yourself. You don't want everyone knowing like, oh. So having them in all gender bathrooms and girls' bathrooms, it's very necessary because also it's accessible to you and not like just everyone. Like you're able to get it like on your own. So I think that's why it should be necessary, why it's necessary to have them accessible in all bathrooms.
Hi, I'm Zoe. We need to provide feminine products because they are expensive and not everyone can afford them. A survey made in 2019 showed that the average woman spends $13 a month on feminine products. We also need to provide them because girls are sometimes embarrassed to ask the teacher or the nurse for pads. A study made in 2017 in the UK shows that only 22% of girls feel comfortable talking to their teacher. Students also don't know when they will get their period, so it can be reassuring to know that feminine products are always available.
Hi, I'm Zena Shaw, and to stress what Chelsea said earlier, one of the big things that came up a lot during discussions was that girls and women aren't the only people who menstruate. There are non-binary people, there are transgender men, and everyone in between. So that is why we feel the need to put them in the non-binary restrooms, to make sure that everyone, no matter your gender identification, can still have what you need. And also, there are a wide variety of ages that you can start menstruating at. So that's why we want to put them in the younger bathrooms as well, because it would be even harder for younger girls or non-binary folk or boys to go and talk about that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Next, we're gonna have Sonali and Isabel talk about like the process and the plan and the next steps after they brought up this initiative and all the awareness involved.
Hi, I'm Sonali Morrissey Dekne, and I think that once Chora had sent everyone the petition link, we had gotten a lot of kids to sign it, but we really felt like that wasn't going to be enough. So we decided to set up a meeting with Mr. Lewis, and over the next few weeks, we talked about how we would want to put in menstrual products and where, what kinds, all of that stuff. And so now, it's finally happening. So that's nice.
Hi, my name is Isabel Wood, and as Sonali said, we had multiple meetings with our principal, Mr. Lewis, that were discussing what we wanted to accomplish. And in these meetings, we talked about what we wanted to get done and when, but we also went into the specifics like how we wanted the products of varying sizes, etc. And everyone pitched in and got the opportunity to express their thoughts and opinions. And I would really like to thank Mr. Lewis for supporting us and hearing us out and helping us throughout the process.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sonali and Isabel. All right, Kate's gonna kind of wrap it up for everyone.
I am Kate. I speak for all of us when I say that we feel extremely proud to have been a part of the process. We're so grateful that we got the opportunity to speak about this tonight and thankful for everyone that's helped make this happen. As for the final steps, the district will be distributing free menstrual products of all different types, fits, and sizes to the Brookline Public Schools. It will be accessible in the girls and all gender restrooms of grades 4 and up. Thank you so much for listening to us.
All right, great job, girls. You did an awesome job with this. Give yourselves a round of applause. I'm here to say last a few words is that, I think everyone knows the district's gonna be putting these in a lot of the bathrooms in the schools sometime in the next few weeks. But prior to the district doing this, I was gonna use some of my principal money and kind of partner with putting it in ourselves, but we don't have to do that any longer because the district's gonna be putting those in the restrooms very soon. So we're excited, the girls here are excited, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lewis. And I will say to the committee, to the community, and to the Baker representatives tonight, I think upon one of my earliest visits to Baker School, Mr. Lewis shared with me your advocacy, as well as what you all were working on. And that just made me proud as a new superintendent to know that you all had taken this initiative to get this started for your school. So I'm so pleased and so proud of you. And so, Madam Chair, we turn it back over to you if there are any questions from the committee.
Sure, Dr. Guillory, did you want to show them the certificate that you're going to give?
Great reminder. Here is a copy of the certificate that will be presented to Baker School, and it says, the Baker School, the Public Schools of Brookline Spotlight on Excellence is awarded to the Baker School Student Initiative for Menstrual Products, and it's signed by myself as well as the chair of the school committee, Suzanne Fettersfield.
That's
so
great.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for coming and sharing. Is there anyone in the school committee that had a question or comment? Yeah, Stephen, and then Val.
Thanks, Suzanne. That was great. Thank you so much for that presentation. It seems like it's a small thing, but it makes such a big difference in so many kids' lives. I just want to know if you can advise any other students who are listening, if they have a similar idea for an initiative at their building that'll make a difference, what's the way that they could get started?
Does anybody want to take that? Zena had her hand up. Go ahead, Zena.
So I personally wasn't the one who started this, but I noticed that what people did and what we did when we were all together was you get a lot of people who agree with you, because if there's an issue that is important enough to you, then it's probably going to be important to a lot of other people. And you do what you can. You try to bring it to the attention of as many people as possible. You do things like how Carmen and the rest of us organized the Red Shirt Day, and you try to talk to teachers and your principal about it. And then they talk to more important people and it gets done.
Thanks.
Thank you. Val? Oops, you just went on mute, Val.
I'm on mute. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you. You all are amazing. This is an effort that's been around for a while, and you seem to be really pushing it over the finish line. I do want to say that it's getting so much attention on 4 of the committees I sit on policy, on government affairs, on capital, and on the new Driscoll Building Committee. This is an issue that we're talking about at all of those committees. So I wanted to just make sure that you know that it's now baked into how we are really thinking about new building construction and where to place bathrooms and how to make sure that there is that access. And I also want to make a plug for all of you activists out there. There is a state bill to make this initiative a statewide initiative. So I'm sure they'd love to hear from you at the State House. So if you want to connect with me by email, and I will make sure to get some letters and things out to all of our legislators.
Thank you, Val. So I think you should all be very proud of the work you've done and the fact that you come and speak to school committee. There are people who don't like to do that or are reluctant to do that, and you're right here giving it your all. So thank you so much. We hope to hear from you again on whatever your next big effort will be. And you are welcome to stay as long as you want, but we perfectly understand that you may want to leave and have the rest of your evening for whatever you wish to do. So thank you very much, and congratulations, Principal Lewis, for really a job well done by your students. Okay, Dr. Guillory, it's back to you.
Our next Spotlight on Excellence presentation is for the BHS Boys Varsity Soccer Team in recognition of their winning the MIAA Division I State Championship. My son and I witnessed the team's thrilling double overtime win at Manning Field in Lynn against our rival Newton North. We are proud to welcome the team this evening and recognize the hard work and determination that they have exemplified all season. I'll turn it over to soccer coach, BHS educator, Kyle Bulio Jones to now hear more about the team and meet the players. Coach.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that introduction. I want to start out by thanking the school committee and the superintendent, for recognizing our team tonight and for this award. It was great to hear that you were at the game with your son and got to witness the super fans and the support that we had from the community for this event, which was great. Truly was a team effort for us. My assistant coach, Chad Pelton, is also on this call, who was, an integral part of this team, and he'll introduce himself in a moment. We also had our athletic trainer, Alex Jacek, Pete Rittenberg, our athletic director, our new assistant athletic director, Rich Gard-Verrier, and our principal, Anthony Meyer, was also, huge support for us. So we couldn't have done it without their support, as well as the parents, the alumni who followed us and really have built this program and helped us get to where we are, and all the community members for their support throughout our entire run. So this year, as was mentioned there, we won the Division I State Championship. During our state tournament run, which is 5 games, we won each game 3 times. 3 games were in the last 10 minutes. Twice we won in overtime, and we won all the games by 1 goal. This really is a testament to the trust that each of the players have in each other and themselves individually. It represents the preparation that they put in during the summer, throughout the season, really, pushing each other in every practice and trying to make each other and the team the best that they can. And really, most importantly, it shows the character, heart, focus, and determination that this team had throughout the entire season. I'm incredibly proud of this group. thrilled to see what they continue to do and the amazing things that they do as athletes and, most importantly, as individuals in the future. So throughout the season, we really stress and talk about this concept of putting the team first and, putting the individual, second, and really throughout the process, how important it is to think about the team and all of your decisions. But I do think, it's important that they get this individual recognition tonight. So I want to let each of them introduce themselves. So we'll go through and allow them to introduce themselves, say what elementary school they are coming from, what grade they are in now, and just what position, if they have anything else they'd briefly like to discuss. First person I'd like to introduce, and I'll let him say his name and his role in the Brookline community, is the assistant coach, Chad Pelton.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chad Pelton. I am the 7th and 8th grade science teacher at Runkle School. I'm in my 18th year of teaching, and I believe this is my 16th year as a coach for the Brookline boys soccer team. I've been with Kyle, I think it's now 5 or 6 years on the varsity program, and then a couple years before with Jeff Katz. And then before that, I was the JV coach. So been in the program for quite some time. And I have to say, thank you very much for having us. These boys have been amazing to work with. And I can't even tell you how excited I've been to be a part of this program. So thank you for having us, and we'll turn it over. Those 7th grade kids were a much better speaker than I was. Sorry.
Yeah, it's hard to follow up after them. So the leadership of this group, includes Coach Pelton, as well as 4 captains, and there are 4 seniors, and there are 10 other seniors that make up our senior class. So, they really led by example on and off the field this season. You'll notice as they are introducing themselves, or as you look across the screens here, many of them have blonde bleached hair, which is a team tradition that they have been doing for many years. When they make the tournament, they all go ahead and bleach their hair for a little team bonding. And it really, makes them represent the community and show who they are, and they have fun with it. So I'll turn it over to the captains here to introduce themselves and talk briefly about their experience.
Hey, my name's Evan Gattel, and I went to Runkle Elementary School, and I play forward, and I'll pass it over to Max Hatchett.
So my name is Max Hatchett. I went to Driscoll, and I play forward as well.
My name is Tyler Mahoney, one of 4 captains. I went to Lawrence School, and I played center back.
Hi, I'm Toby. I went to Florida Ruffin Ridley School, and I played center mid.
Yeah, so like Kyle said before, it was obviously like a great season, and we really just wanted to thank you all for, supporting us throughout the entire thing. Like, we couldn't have done it without you guys.
And now we're going to introduce the rest of the seniors. So I'll pass it to another one of our many Maxes, Max Blaney.
Yeah, I'm Max Blaney. I went to the Pierce School, and I played both defender and goalkeeper.
Hi, I'm Isaac Heffis. I went to the Florida Ruffin Ridley School, and I played attacking midfielder.
Hi, my name is Ezra Kornmeyer. I went to Driscoll Elementary School. I played attacking midfielder, and actually kind of played like all over in the midfield this year. Kind of, stuff changes during the season. And I'm going to pass it to my guy, Colin.
Hi, I'm Colin. I'm a senior. I went to Florida Ruffin Ridley, and I played defense.
I'm not sure if there's an order to this, but I'll jump in. My name's Ben. I went to Runkle, and I played in the midfield this year.
Hi, I'm Rafa. I went to Baker and I played as a midfielder this season.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I went to the Florida Ruffin Ridley School and I play goalkeeper.
My name is Rowan. I went to Lincoln Driscoll and the Florida Ruffin Ridley School, and I played left wing back and right wing back most of the season. And I'll pass it to Charlie. Chuck.
I'm Charlie. I went to Runkle School and I played wing back, left or right.
I'm not sure if Oscar's here, but I'm Sam. I went to the Shady Hill School in Cambridge, and I played in the midfield this year.
My name is Tashiki Kobayashi. I went to Lawrence and I played in the midfield this year.
I'm Ellery. I went to Baker and I played midfield.
I'm Henry. I went to Lincoln School and I played forward. And I passed.
I'm Leo. I played winger and I went to Florida Ruffin Ridley. I passed it to Eamon Boschel.
I'm Eamon. I went to the Pierce School and I played winger. I'll pass it to Sebastian.
I'm not sure if they're here, but I'm Oliver Stern. I went to Lawrence and I played center mid.
I'm Danny. I went to the Florida Roughly Ridley School in Lawrence, and I play left and right wing.
Okay, I believe that's everybody. Did we miss anyone?
Yeah, I just
Made it. All right.
yeah.
Our basketball player as well.
Hi, my name is Taj Horwitz. I went to Pierce. I'm in the 11th grade, and I play forward.
All right. And again, there's your Division I boys soccer state champions. Each player here was, tremendous this season, incredibly proud. So much fun to be part of this group. And, we couldn't have done it without the support of the community coming out to all the games and cheering us on and, being there for us. So we appreciate that. And I know that these boys will remember this for the rest of their lives. I know that Coach Pelton and I will look back on this and talk about this for years to come. So it's truly something that you guys will remember. And, hopefully we'll stick with you and you'll remember the lessons that you learned and, you'll turn out to be some great individuals. And I look forward to following you with that. And, thank you once again.
Thank you all again and so much. And so here again is your certificate that says the Public Schools of Brookline Spotlight on Excellence is awarded to the BHS 2021 Boys Varsity Soccer Team. Again, congratulations on the victory. Well deserved and well earned. Madam Chair, we pass it back over to you for committee questions or comments.
Well, and just a little known fact that probably no one knows, but I actually coached soccer when my kids were young at Pierce for a very short time. But, I loved it. It was great. Comments from school committee? I'm not seeing people, so you may have to jump in. We've got, Helen, I see you.
I just want to let you guys know how proud we are of you and how amazing it is that you got to the state's finals and won. It's really a testament to you guys, to your coaches, to your families. So thank you. Thank you for making us proud.
Yes, many, many years I know of soccer practice and hard work and tournaments and all of that.
I must admit, I really enjoyed the Pierce School, the way the college football players do it. I mean, professional ones do.
So thank you very much. Thank you for coming and giving us of your time. Thank you for your winning spirit and your teamwork that got you there. You are welcome to stay as long as you want on this meeting, this Zoom call, but you're also welcome to go and enjoy your evening. So thank you again very much. And thank you to the coaches for all that you did.
Thank you.
Yay. Dr. Guillory, do you have other news in your superintendent's report or?
Yes, ma'am. And what I'll do is try to drive briefly through those. We do have some slides prepared to share with the committee and the community tonight. And so first up, we will start with one of our little friends over at the Beacon. I had the opportunity to get out and see some additional kids today. And before, as I was walking in, Margaret told me about Jack, and Jack had a joke that he wanted to share with me. So Jack's question, although it's cut off a little bit, his lead-in question is, where does the snowman keep his money? So we're going to listen to Jack a couple of times.
We can't hear it.
Please tell us the punchline, Dr. Guillory.
Did you hear it?
No, we couldn't hear it on our end. Basically, Jack says, where does the snowman keep his money? And he says, in the snowbank, but I hope his accounts don't get frozen. So he was all too kind there with to share his joke and his excitement. So Jack, we made your debut, but we'll make sure we share that out so that the committee can hear it. Our next slide is I wanted to do a brief sort of a timeline review of the closure for Monday. Certainly, I hope the community has seen the announcement for a snow closure for Friday in consultation with the Department of Public Works. We are concerned that the school area won't be cleared in time to host school tomorrow. So we put that communication out just prior to, I think, 5 o'clock. So when we look back at the timeline of events that led up to the Monday closure, there were a series of meetings, two that I was called to by the Commissioner of Education. So there was one the week prior to winter recess where the commissioner alerted us that there would be masks that would be shared out to all the districts in the state. And then there was another meeting that was held, I think, on the 29th, where the commissioner shared that school districts would be receiving the rapid COVID tests. So we had made preparations to pick up our kits, our masks, on the 30th, and we distributed those. Our custodial team, a huge thank you to them for getting all of those masks out to the building sites and locations, desks and those types of things. Then on the 31st, we were notified by DESE that the procurement of the test kits was going to be delayed, and that we would also not get the original amount of allocation that was happening. That we were allocated. So I worked with Town Administrator Mel Klegner, and Trish worked with Pat Maloney over in the Department of Health to secure some additional kits so that we could make sure that we could have enough test kits for all of our staff. On the first, a small group of us met on New Year's to actually review our plans for distribution. Got those, make sure we were all organized there. And then on January 2nd, we opened 2 sites, both at Baker and BHS from 10 to 2. We had committee members and several staff members across the district that participated in that. And so again, a huge thank you to those. And we delivered, I passed out approximately 600 test kits to staff on Saturday midday. Then Sunday evening, I'm sorry, school leaders, I called a meeting with school leaders and the senior leadership team about 7:30 that night. We chose that time because we recognized that folks that had picked up the tests would be possibly taking them later in the evening. And we also wanted to be mindful of dinner time and those types of things. So we called a meeting with senior leaders and principals to assess their staffing for Monday. And in doing that, at the beginning of the meeting, we had a report out of where staffing were for each building. And then as the meeting went on and we met for about an hour, hour and a half or so, more and more staff, I'm not going to be able to make it, I won't be in, I tested positive, those types of things were coming in over the course of the meeting. So that uptick was occurring, and already we were carrying sort of what we call our nominal absences, whether those are leaves, child rearing leaves, or someone tested positive potentially over the break. They were certainly in contact with the nurses that worked during the break. So we knew that a number of staff already were going to be out because they had been reporting during the course of the break. So at the time that I made the call to shut down the system, we froze the numbers at that point, and we were at approximately 160 absences at that time. Now, what principals typically report that their typical experience is, if I have on a given Sunday, I may have 5 people out. Over the course of the morning, I may get 5 more people out. So that puts a particular school at 10. Well, some of our schools at this instance were already at 25, 27, 12 absences already. So just the prediction that we would have more out in the course of the morning and not be able to pivot in a quick enough time to cover those, I made the determination that we needed to shut down for Monday. January 3rd occurs, schools are closed due to the short staffing, and a number of those absences that were in the system already did not have sub coverage. And so it was a balance of both of those items, staff absences as well as not having substitutes to cover those. As you all know, I think in one of the many communications that have gone out, we put a call out for subs. And when I checked earlier today, we had approximately 24 folks that have applied since those flyers had gone out. And those of you that may catch Channel 7 news last night, they actually put the flyers up on their news. Their 10 o'clock news is actually where I saw it. So we're getting some airtime from that. Our next slide, on January 3rd, the team met, senior leaders as well as principals, to continue monitoring absences now for Tuesday. We were being very strategic and looking at, again, which courses or which classes or programs were going to be in a struggle. And again, because principals were watching their staffing all during the break, the Tuesday staffing projection was slightly better, not perfect, but slightly better than it was what we were experiencing for the Monday rush. Monday afternoon, we then sent the message out that we were going to be holding school Tuesday, and that district staff stood by to cover any openings that we had. And so again, central office, district leaders, staff members across the district stepped in to cover classes. And again, the principals continue to give their gratitude and thank yous to the many, many folks that stepped up to help out where needs were met. On January 4th, we were certainly open. I think at 5 o'clock Tuesday morning, I received a message that there were some questions about the DESI masks that were out in the news. So again, we started working with the operations team. And again, thank you to Matt Gillis and the operations crew. They pulled what we had in the KN95 masks that we had in our coffers and got those distributed out to all the school buildings for staff to pick up a new set of masks if they had questions about the DESI mask while we continue to get more information there. So on Tuesday, when our staff were reporting back, we made sure that they had some of our KN95 masks that we had there. And what we'll continue to do ongoing is looking our health team. Again, I can't thank our nurses enough. Tricia Laham and team, they are working around the clock. And as so many of us are being impacted by the virus itself, some of our members are falling out of formation. And then when they do, the next crew steps in. And so again, these are hard times for all. And I want to personally thank everyone for their flexibility and stepping up. No one has said no when a request was made of anyone. School leaders continue to monitor absences. And what we've been doing is every day, we've been having check-in with building leaders. Number one, I want to check on their health and well-being, how they're doing, as well as the health of their schools. I had several check-ins with them along the way. And so we just wanted to make sure that everyone is doing well or doing the best they can under these circumstances. So the district stands committed to doing all we can to make sure that our schools are open safely during the current COVID surge that we're experiencing. Next slide. So this week, prior to the break, I finished, I think, round 3 of my visits, which concluded at Lincoln, Pierce, and BHS. And in these meetings, I'm working with principals on their goals, as well as looking at their school improvement plans and the work that they're presently doing in their buildings in terms of their academic program. I had the opportunity on the 20th and 21st to visit all the schools before the winter break. Again, just to see all the leaders one more time before we took a small break. And then this week, I had the opportunity to again visit all of our sites. I made it to one deep location. Didn't get to the other 3 today. And then next week, we plan to visit Driscoll and Baker for my next round of visits. For our community engagement, certainly the concerts, I had the opportunity to attend the fabulous performances at the high school at the winter concert. Extravaganza is what I will call it. And then for the holiday, we sent everyone off with their virtual greeting card. That's a montage of all of our district schools there if you can't make that out. So it was a nice treat, and then had the opportunity to meet with parent leaders on the 5th, and there Hal and Anthony presented an overview of the high school project, and Janae shared her report of entry findings for the equity work there that she's been doing. We have our upcoming meetings with parents, Baker on the 21st of January, and Heath School on the 8th of February. And I believe, is that it, Aaron? All right. I think that's it for our community update there. And if I didn't say it again, I sent the announcement out that we are closed for snow day tomorrow. So there's a whole series or slew that's there, but this is the real McCoy snow day. And again, thank you to town administrator as well as Aaron Galantine. We've been on the phone all day, so we've become best buds in coordinating weather events. So, and again, the intensity and the timing of the storm coincides with the morning commute. And last I looked, I think prior to the meeting, there were about 25 districts sort of in the stream that have closed already for the snow day. So with that, I stand for any questions that you may have.
Questions or comments? I can see everybody on one screen now. Stephen.
Thanks, Suzanne. Thanks, Dr. Guillory, for that superintendent report. And thanks in particular for that additional level of transparency into the minute-by-minute decision-making that you and your colleagues underwent to determine how to keep schools open. I just have a clarification question. When we reopened for Tuesday, I think your slide showed that it was around 88% of teachers in schools. Do you have I couldn't tell from the numbers for when we closed, what percentage of those were teachers who had called in sick versus other supporting educators. And all I want to know is, do you have a rough sense of what the difference was between Monday and Tuesday? Because I couldn't make that calculation based on the numbers you presented.
Monday is hard to determine because at the moment when we closed, the system no longer took reports.
I see.
Yeah, so in the instance where we had several schools that were in the 20s with absences at that moment. So if the pattern persisted of an additional half would call in between that time in the morning, that would have put several of our schools in the 30s or some potentially in the 40s. So I made the executive decision at that moment based on that pattern of behavior to shut down.
Okay, so it may not be totally clear what the difference between Monday and Tuesday was.
Exactly.
The bottom line was, once we got to around 88% with the additional coverage that we had rounded up on Monday, you felt that we can make a go decision by that time.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And again, there were a multitude of factors that were in there. We were looking at, and I think today, when Trish and I checked in, a good number of our nurses are out of the system as well, and then not having backups or redundancies for them. So it gets really hard in terms of the operations to make those things happen. Many of the details, the excruciating details, I'm glazing over for the benefit of the committee. But just know that your senior team and your building leaders, and again, I apologize profusely to the community for making a call that late. But at that time, I felt it was in the best interest of the district because we could have potentially had students in a spot where we didn't have enough staff coverage to adequately take care of them on that day. So that was a very hard call to do. And principals were trying to figure out every way that they could to keep schools open for us. But we feel we made the right call there and stand confidently behind that.
Well, I just want to thank you and publicly acknowledge the work that you and your staff put in over break, over the weekend, to try to keep schools open for as long as you could before making that decision. So thank you for that.
Yes, Susan.
Yeah, thank you for this. I don't want to rehash anything that we just said. I would just say that when we were talking about potential COVID closures a year plus ago now, we did talk about whether we would feel comfortable if there were certain grade levels or certain buildings that could open and other ones would not open. Kind of how did we feel about that? And we just made this call, with Driscoll a couple weeks ago when they had a fire in one of their neighboring buildings. So I guess if the committee, it's my sense, or the last time we talked about this as a committee, we were comfortable with the idea that as long as there was an equitable sort of look across, an equitable set of criteria, that some buildings may open and some may not, and that's okay. So at any rate, I just wanted to say that, and it may be true. The high school schedule is so different from K-8, and the K-8s are in such really, really different sort of geographical settings for snow days and other things. So at any rate, I just want to kind of put that out there, that was part of the discussion. And I don't know, hopefully we won't have to deal with it with COVID again, but I just want to put that out there.
And that's a great point too, Susan. And when we looked at it, it was the hard decision of that time. How do we put out a message that then says some schools are open and some schools are closed? But I think in the case, the point that you're making is that the committee is open to that, as are we, in terms of when we have enough runway to make those types of informed decisions.
Helen?
Yeah, I know that some parents out there will be asking, why didn't we do a late start? And I'm wondering if you and Aaron Schutt-Galantine thought about that possibility. And
yes, we did. Erin and I talked about that actually, and she says that the time that it takes for when the last snowflake falls to clear, it would be about 6 hours. So at that time, she didn't feel that the schools would be ready to actually open. So both the sidewalks, the parking lots, and those types of things wouldn't be ready.
And this is always the hardest decision a superintendent ever has to make. Or maybe a hurricane might be the other one, but at least in Massachusetts, the snow days are, and the seniors are always thrilled because they don't have to make it up. Right, Claire? Thank you. I know it's a hard decision.
Thank you for your report, Dr. Guillory. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Claire, you're up next. I know we're running a little late, so thank you for hanging in there with us.
Yeah, of course. Actually, I have a guest joining me today. Oh, there she is. Okay, awesome. Okay, we'll get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Claire Gallion, and I am the student representative on school committee. For tonight's report, I've invited a very special guest. Azavia is a junior at BHS who contacted me about speaking to you all, and I am so glad she did. Though she's only in 11th grade, Azavia works at a law firm in Cambridge, was chosen to represent Brookline in a statewide organization started by the governor, and started an environmental magazine, among many other things. We are so lucky to have such an amazing person as part of our community. Tonight, she is here to present to you all about racial inequalities in Brookline. I hope I'll hand off the mic to her now.
Thank you so much, Claire. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Azavia, as Claire said. I'm a junior at BHS. And today I'd like to address the racial disparities and achievement gap in Brookline, as well as some proposed solutions. These are based on extensive research and my experience as a student, and I've provided you all with the methodology for the research and statistics in a separate outline that I believe you should all already have access to. As a reminder of where we are, the most recent MCAS scores from the spring of 2021, as reported in the Brookline tab, revealed that 68% of white students in grades 3 through 8 were meeting or exceeding expectations set by the state of Massachusetts in math, compared to 17% of Black students. In English language arts, 78% of white students met versus 32% of Black students. A comparison with 2019 MCAS statistics suggests that this gap is widening by 4 percentage points for ELA and 3 for math. In a school committee report in 2017, researchers found that the 2011 math achievement gap between Black and white students was 40 percentage points. In the spring of 2016, the achievement gap between these two groups had increased to 43 percentage points. I want to note that I do not believe in the efficacy of MCAS as a means of testing achievement or comprehension, nor do I suggest that MCAS scores on their own can measure the success of a school district. However, these disparities are striking and need to be addressed. I was very concerned when I read the comments of school committee members who were surprised by this. These numbers are alarming, but they are not surprising to me as a student of color in the Brookline School District, and I doubt they come as a surprise to the people who are living and addressing the reality of educational inequity in Brookline on a daily basis. I'm concerned that this committee does not have and does not seem to have sought out the expertise that is required to meaningfully address these deep-rooted issues. Research nationwide makes clear that the racial achievement gap in America is real, is widespread, and is detrimental to the health and welfare of students of color. I suggest to you as well that it is also detrimental to the welfare of white students. We should be providing the resources and opportunities to cultivate socially and culturally aware students who have equal access to success. We all agree that we want to address these issues, although I think sometimes we get lost in not being able to see exactly where the problem is. In 2018, the United States Department of Education Civil Rights, together with Stanford University, created an initiative called ProPublica, and in their study of The Brookline public school system found that white students at Brookline High School are 3.8 times more likely to take an AP class than Black students. Access to opportunity, a clearly persistent and ever-present issue. The first step in breaking down what leads to poor performance on standardized testing is understanding the historical context. Black students have often been deterred from STEM, and the idea that Blackness is an inherent ailment to intelligence is very evident in the shared experiences of Black people of all ages all over the country. Cultivating a positive mindset is an enormous factor in academic achievement. A Stanford study actually found that even after statistically controlling for IQ, working memory, math anxiety, and general attitude towards academics, children with poor attitudes in math rarely performed well in the subject, while those with strongly positive attitudes had a range of math achievements. The study affirms that without even changing the curriculum, providing a welcoming environment improves test scores and helps with memory retention. An example of an opening for bias that perpetuates deep-rooted insecurities that Black youth already have is the policy of recommendations for 8th graders going into high school, which is extremely subjective and lacks clear guidelines for students. These statistics do not signify that Brookline's Black students have a lower capacity for achievement. I know because I'm one of them. Structural racism perpetuates, creates, and exacerbates disparity. My experience bears this out. I was in the Math Enrich program at Lincoln. I was the only BIPOC student in it. I had straight A's for all of middle school. So I was confused when a teacher pulled me aside to tell me, and I quote, "You could take advanced math if you want, but expect to get B's or C's," end quote. I was caught off guard. This was not the response many of my peers got. I went on to take advanced classes without a tutor or Russian math like many of my classmates, and I did well. In the most recent data collection published by the school committee in 2017, they found a 0% recommendation rate for advanced or AP math for Black students versus 20% for white students and 35% for Asian students, 0%. In track subjects, there is no way to diversify high-level classes when Black students aren't even making it in the door. I experienced this having been the only BIPOC student in any of my advanced or AP classes for all of high school. Even when I would get one of the highest grades in my class, I was not taken seriously. I experienced microaggressions regularly, as well as inappropriate comments from students and teachers alike. It was on Asking for Courage Day in my advanced math class that I decided that I would never subject myself to pursuing a career in STEM. That should not be the takeaway from high school, and that is not the message I want my little sister to internalize. One of the factors contributing to not only teachers deterring Black students away from taking high-level classes, but also poor experiences in those classes and high rates at which the level of classes are dropped is bias in teachers. In a paper titled "Teachers Are People Too," a team of researchers from Princeton and Tufts universities compare teachers' explicit and implicit biases with those of other American adults. They found that teachers' biases reflect that of the general population. Unconscious bias then operates in our schools as it does the rest of society. We need to think critically about how to meaningfully address this. Black students are disproportionately disciplined in Brookline schools, reflecting the same biases. In 2018, Black students at BHS were 3.3 times more likely to be suspended compared with white students, and 11.2 times more likely at Runkle School. One of the most common attempts to combat these discriminatory biases is through anti-racist trainings, which, although helpful, often only scratch the surface. I want to recommend something different, however. We need a diverse teaching faculty in Brookline. It is difficult to overstate the political, pedagogical, and personal importance of Black teachers. In a recent article in Time magazine, it states Black teachers today are by nearly every metric more successful at supporting the achievement and well-being of Black children. Black students who have even one Black teacher during elementary school are more likely to graduate high school and consider college. Black students with Black teachers experience less exclusionary discipline and fewer office visits, a crucial break in the school to prison pipeline, a disturbing and widespread trend in which school discipline interactions lead to interactions with the criminal justice system. In the midst of growing concerns over police brutality and systemic racial inequality, students of all races need teachers of all races. More specifically, we need Black teachers. This piece is not easy either. Recognizing the need for Black teachers is not enough. The district should, if it is truly committed, invest in fostering talent among up-and-coming teachers of color, instead of just expecting qualified candidates to fall on our doorstep. Initiatives like the National Center for Teacher Residencies Black Educators, a 5-year, $20 million effort to recruit, develop, and retain new Black teachers, has been proven to be extremely effective in recruiting and retaining Black teachers. They base selection on the factors that best correlate with effective teaching and do away with vague criteria like resilience or organization that introduces bias into the selection process. They use culturally responsive and high-touch recruitment strategies and check in with candidates multiple times throughout the application process, and they have seen overwhelmingly positive results. Once teacher candidates are accepted, they create emergency funds for candidates to draw from when faced with unexpected circumstances, organize and support affinity spaces within their program so that teachers of color can discuss the unique challenges they face, encourage one another, and build skills together, a vital part of maintaining Black teachers. They also pay for additional tutoring to prepare candidates for state licensure exams, testing fees for those who cannot afford them, and offer stipends to offset living expenses during student teaching. This is not inexpensive, but Brookline has been very willing to pour money into other projects like construction. A commitment to equity means a meaningful allocation of time, energy, resources, and reconceptualization. This is one of the most pressing issues that require the allocation of funds, and we have ample research to support how to do it. A subset of that is also hiring more guidance counselors, psychologists, and early intervention specialists of color. The educational community has recognized a mental health crisis amongst adolescents, but the disproportionate effects on BIPOC are often overlooked. Research finds that BIPOC students are less likely to have access to mental health services, seek out services, receive needed care, and more likely to receive poor quality of care and end services prematurely. And we experience slights and racism at school. Just because we are students of color does not mean we know how to address these incidents when they happen, that we are equipped to confront our teachers, that we understand the interactions that leave us feeling angry and confused and believing less in ourselves. We are kids. Often students of color in our schools are looked to by adults to solve these problems. We are children. I am asking you to hire qualified teachers, mental health professionals, DEI specialists, district-wide consultants, and other people who are qualified to examine, evaluate, and address structural racism in Brookline schools. Students of color need adults of color they can go to when we experience racism. There are also structural issues about who runs the district and who is and is not represented in the governance in the district that are very concerning. For instance, parents of METCO students do not live in Brookline and in turn cannot vote for the school committee, but their voices and needs still deserve to be heard. They are voiceless. This should change. There should be representation for METCO students on the school committee. There should be a maximum student to teacher ratio so that if and when students fall through the cracks, teachers can be there to support them. It is unfair to both students and teachers that teachers are not being compensated for all of the work they do beyond their defined roles. I, like many of my peers, have experienced the realities of that during the recent strike. But of course, despite this affecting all students, it did not affect everyone equally. Those who can afford tutors undoubtedly were fine, while those less privileged were hurt the most. Both Mr. J. Malcolm Cawthorn, the METCO coordinator, and I, along with many other educators, believe firmly in the efficacy of detailed progress reports. One of the only and best tangible early intervention methods already put in place that allows parents who may not otherwise know the progress of their child to have a condensed summary of where they are, and it allows students and educators to work together to improve learning and grades before it is too late. I believe that this is an initiative that should undoubtedly be worked into future teacher contracts, as educators should be compensated for the time and energy that goes into this. A commitment to educational equity is resource intensive. That is why Brookline needs to have a transparent action plan. There needs to be some form of checks and balances, and information, statistics, and a trackable plan needs to be easily accessible to students and parents so the school committee and the town of Brookline can be held accountable. We should be following in the footsteps of the educational institutions that are leading the way in grappling with the lasting effects of centuries of racism. Brown University's action plan is the gold standard in my mind, and I highly recommend it to you. It can be found in the outline provided to you. It outlines areas of commitment to inclusion and equity, providing measurable goals and benchmarks by which the university will address, improve, and invigorate itself as an institution fully committed to equity and inclusion. Like Brown and many other schools, Brookline should submit to an internal audit by an external source and establish markers or categories that will be reevaluated in great depth and with tangible information, like percentage points, enrollment rates, GPA comparisons, etc. every year. Transparency and eliminating vague and immeasurable goals like hiring more Black teachers is one of the most important steps. And to be able to accurately establish a baseline and a realistic goal, we must first recognize where we are falling short, which is where an internal audit comes in. Lastly, the school committee should create a subcommittee on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The subcommittee should contain representation from the METCO program, student representatives, DEI specialists like Dean Utaro. It should be led by people of color. We should be hiring consultants who not only have the qualifications to address equity policy writing, but the experience with planning and actually carrying out proposed solutions in other communities. I could not be more grateful for what Brookline has done for my education, but I also know how frustrating it is that I've been giving speeches on race and sitting on student panels for staff diversity training since 7th grade. I've expressed my most vulnerable experiences with racism before I was even old enough to comprehend them myself, in the hopes that things would change. And I have watched the same cycle of expressions of sadness and shock at my testimony, followed by empty promises from administrators. I'm 16 years old and I'm exhausted. And while the issues I've addressed may have affected me personally, this is not a personal issue. This is a systemic issue that has created the circumstances for my experiences. I'm not asking for sympathy, I'm asking for action. Black students in Brookline deserve better, and I'm coming to you because I think that there is amazing potential for growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Azavia. Thank you. Are there comments or questions? Okay, I'm seeing, I think you gave us a lot to think about. I do. Stephen?
Yeah, I just wanted to see if Janae wanted to make any comments in response to that. Since Janae, I know your office is doing so much to address many of the points that she raised.
Sure. I just want to say thank you so much, Azavia, for everything that you've said, what you brought to this conversation today. I am hoping that other folks will take a moment to follow up and ask some questions of pieces that you've shared. I agree, Suzanne, there was a lot in this very powerful speech, and Azavia and I have had some time to talk about some of these pieces, and certainly this is a time for the rest of the folks here, if there are things that you want to share, something that struck you or questions that you want to ask, please feel free.
Well, I'll just say two things. One is I'd love to get a copy of that speech. There were so many concrete recommendations and really well expressed ideas around specific actions. And I think I'd like to review them with some more time. And the second thing is I just want to underscore what I think most of us in the school committee also feel, which is that this is important and this is urgent. And I would only add to the statistics that Azavia cited that Brookline is an example of where the trend is worsening, and it's worsening more rapidly in Brookline than it is in many of Massachusetts educational districts. So I just want to say, I just want to express more appreciation to Azavia for this speech, and it shouldn't fall to Azavia to do this work.
Susan.
Yeah, likewise, I do want to say thank you to Azavia for coming. I think one thing maybe, and this is not a comment for right now or today, is because as I was listening to all of the very powerful examples that you were giving us, as you mentioned somewhere in there, these aren't things that we haven't heard before. And I know that, conversations about establishing Janae's office probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago, fed into like real solid commitment in terms of personnel, in terms of budgets, against a number of these issues, and continuing to get data reported back to us. So I guess my question is that I didn't expect everything to be solved overnight, but what would be helpful for me as a school committee member is to understand if there are places where we are doing things and spending a lot of money investing in things that either aren't the right things to be doing, or need to be communicated better, or need to be invested in differently. I think that would be really helpful for us to know. I mean, the Metco example is a great example. We don't have Metco representation on the school committee, but 5 years ago, when I became chair of the BHS building project, I put a Metco parent on the committee. And we have a Metco parent on the Driscoll building committee now. And like that has become part of, and that particular individual had really tremendous input along the way. So again, I guess I hear all of it, and it all resonates. And I guess my question is sort of, where are there places where either there are investments that we're not making that, against the things you've mentioned, or where we need to be making different investments. So I just want to put that out there.
If I can respond to that really quickly. So part of the research that I was doing was actually working with other educators. I worked with the dean at Phillips Exeter Academy and the former headmaster of Windsor, as well as the head of City Year. And so one of the biggest things that they were most shocked by, and which was really most shocking to me, is that there is an enormous lack of transparency in Brookline. All of the initiatives that you talk about are not easily accessible at all. And so I would really recommend to you that you look into Brown's equity and inclusion plan, because it has very understandable language that is condensed in a way that not only is it understandable to everybody else who wants to be involved, but students, and it's made accessible every single year. And so Brookline currently doesn't have any infrastructure in place to address specific things and track their progress. And so while we have data collectors, and that's great, and we have this information available to us, it's not presented in a digestible way, and it's not comparative at all. And so that's one of the biggest things that really should be changed, and is a really big part in establishing and encouraging democracy, which I'm sure we can all agree is very important. So
yeah, and I think that those are really important points about making it clear to people what's happening and where the areas are. And so I guess part of what I'm wondering is if there are places, and Janae, you would know this better than anyone else, but like if there are places at the high school like the Sagamore, or like other places where people will get information to be pushing out messages, or other, whatever the other venues are, so that students do understand the kinds of things that are happening, again, along so many of the dimensions that you mentioned, Azavia, which are important. So maybe just we can think about that as well. I think it's important. Thank you.
Can I just say one more thing, Suzanne? I also hear Xavier's remarks as a call to ensure that Janae's office is fully funded. So I know that we're heading into budget season right now. So I would just ask Janae and Dr. Guillory to help give us a sense of what fully funding all the activities that you've been planning, that are the ones that you're doing right now, Janae, but also the ones that are perhaps one priority down. What would it look like to fast track them or to accelerate them? What would the budget look like for that kind of work? I think this is the month to be considering that. Thanks.
Good point. Yeah. So this actually leads into, we're going to public comment next, but after that, we are going to have a report on some of the data we have around disproportionality here in Brookline. So you certainly are welcome to either stay with us or to watch from home separately if you want. So we are covering these topics, certainly not as fast as I'm sure we should be, but we are taking a serious look at some of the questions that you have raised for us, for sure. Helen?
Yeah, Xavier, thank you for your presentation. It truly was quite well done. I'm wondering, you had mentioned that you were on a governor's committee or council. I'm not exactly sure what it's called. Could you tell us a little bit about it and what you do there?
Yeah, it's called Project 351. I'm not sure if you guys
Say that again. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
It's called Project 351. It's a large nonprofit based on student leadership. I've been involved with it for 4 years now, I think. And but an extension of the work that I do for that is that I've been very involved with designing a lot of social justice curriculum and anti-bias training. And so that's put me in touch with other really wonderful people in the community and in the state. And so if we're talking about Brookline as a comparison or like as a reference point to where other states and other places in the state are doing, Brookline has a lot of really wonderful programs, but the information that I'm talking about, which I just want to clarify again to Susan, is not that there's discourse amongst students. I'm sure that you guys are aware that this is something that students care about. This is something that parents care about, but it's about having transparency from the administration. And that's what should be accessible, not students being able to converse about this or have their writing published. It's more about having digestible information from our government in whatever form that may be. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. That was well done. Your research was well done and presented really well. So thank you for that. I do look forward to reading that. I hope we get that report. You can send it to Robin or to Janae and they will get it to us. That would be really helpful. That'd be great.
I think it's in our inbox. We got it late this afternoon.
Oh,
it's in our inbox.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on now. You're welcome again to stay as long as you want. Claire knows the routine. You're welcome to stay, and you're also welcome to go on to your evening if you want, and enjoy your snow day tomorrow for sure. Okay, we're moving on to administrative business. There's a consent agenda. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Thank you, Stephen. Is there a second? Sure, thanks, Val. Are there any questions or concerns about it? I know we have Matt here somewhere. No, he was. There's Matt. Hi, Matt. No, we're ready just to vote. Okay, we will do that then. Susan?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you. Matt, as long as you're here, I just want to say thank you for all the work you did over the weekend to get those masks out and those kits out and all of that you had to do. So I want to make a public thank you for that.
You're very welcome. Operations is always happy to help keep school open.
I know, we really appreciate that. But it's a lot of hard work on a holiday weekend, so thank you for that. We are moving to public comment, and my first speaker is Noah Gronlund Jacob. Is Noah here? Yep.
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Go right ahead, Noah.
Hi, good evening. My name is Noah Gronlund Jacob, and I'm a Brookline High School social studies teacher and a member of the BEU's grievance team. The BEU values collective bargaining because it helps empower our members to stand up and advocate for their rights as employees. Having a say in our working conditions allows the public schools of Brookline to grow and improve as educators bring their expertise to the negotiating table. And one of the key components of our collectively bargained contract is a member's right to file a grievance when their supervisor violates that agreement. While many view the grievance process as a way for educators to simply lodge complaints, the reality is that this contractual right encourages a collaborative problem-solving approach, one where educator concerns must be taken into account when an issue arises, and where a supervisor can no longer make a unilateral decision. So you can imagine how frustrating it is for an educator to file a grievance and receive the response, "This grievance is both procedurally and substantively non-grievable and non-arbitrable, and even if it were, it is rejected," offering nothing regarding the substance to their concerns. This year, we have consistently received this language. Consistently, our educators have been told that their concerns are not protected by the contract. Consistently, the district has decided to allow a problem to continue rather than find a solution. Consistently, issues have been dismissed outright. Keep in mind, grievances are problems that teachers face every day, and they are things that, when left unresolved, impede our ability to do our job, because we need to divide our attention between fixing our working conditions and educating our students. Now, to be fair, we've received language like this before, and we've seen other attempts to restrict this collaborative process, such as having lawyers brought in without notice. So this type of dismissal didn't begin with this administration, but our new administration does have the opportunity to break this cycle. Our union has tried for years to address growing and systemic issues by bringing grievances forward to begin the collaboration process and to get creative in finding solutions. It's high time that the district joins the union, not just at the negotiating table, but in respecting grievances as problem-solving opportunities. Thank you, and I hope everyone enjoys the snow day tomorrow.
Thank you, Noah. Marlene Galvez is next, and then Maggie Caniff.
Gonzalez, it's Cape Verdean. Hi, I hope you all had a good new year and that you and your families are doing well. I'm Marlene Gonzalez. I work at Pierce, and I'm the only middle school ELA teacher of color in this district. I'm a frequent silent representative at negotiations, and starting this year, I am the BEU secretary. But today, these are my personal thoughts. On December 17th, you wrote to parents, not to teachers, but to parents. We understand that many educators may see work to rule as their only way to be heard. Even before this work action, the school committee committed to hold listening sessions to further understand the experiences of our educators. But there's been no mention to teachers about these listening sessions. It's frustrating to be told, well, not told, have others told, that someone has an intention to listen to you, but will give you no details when you email them and ask, and will ignore you for the time being. So please, listen. This year, I teach English to 94 of the world's best 7th graders. They haven't had a normal school year since they were in 4th grade. Sorry, this makes me feel. I'm trying really hard to build their skills, catch them up to where they should be, and make sure they all feel supported and challenged as we go. They deserve to get just as much out of ELA class as other 7th graders whose teachers only teach 70 students, sometimes even fewer, and who have more than 45 minutes per class. This requires constant assessing, planning, and conferencing to give my kiddos feedback so they can develop as readers, writers, and critical thinkers. I also have to come up with individualized plans to help them succeed, support their social and emotional functioning, reach out to parents, make sure I'm following IEPs, 504s, and ICAPs, keep my open grade book updated, meet with specialists, be open to give up preps if a kid is having a rough day and needs to talk, make photocopies, respond to emails from parents, students, and colleagues, have meetings to collaborate with my colleagues, go to IEP meetings, fill out behavior plans, keep up to date on YA novels, make sure students are complying with masks and distancing regulations, and deal with racist micro and macroaggressions. As you know, there's more that we do, but my time here is limited. More and more is demanded from teachers while the school committee gives us less and less. I've taught at Pierce for 7 years now. I've had 6 or 7 superintendents, 3 different vice principal teams, 4 different principals, 3 different rooms in 2 different buildings, and about 3 changes to my teaching load. It is sad that the only constant I've had is that my contract hasn't been settled on time for any of those years. When the Department of Labor Relations rejected your petition for them to step in and mediate, they wrote that there are unresolved issues that would benefit from continued negotiations prior to commencing the mediation process. And in the letter to parents on December 17th, you wrote that you look forward to coming to an agreement with the BEU on these contracts. However, you have offered only one date to the BEU, Monday the 10th, one session, almost a full month later. And those of you on the negotiating team, and I know exactly how little of that time is spent actually talking to each other and how much time is spent in caucus. Enough. We need equitable and manageable workloads that are conducive to student learning. My penguins should not be shortchanged and have teachers with massive workloads who can't give them all the care and time they deserve because they don't live a few miles further south. You have the power to do this. Settle the contract. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Marlene. Maggie, you were up, and then Ann Collins.
Hi. Good evening. I'm a kindergarten teacher at Lincoln and the mom of a second grader at Heath. And I would like to begin my comments tonight by reading a quote from the school committee public statement a few weeks ago on December 17th. Quote, "Some of the BEU's demands don't belong in an employment contract. For example, the BEU has asked us to include contractual language on retaining more teachers of color. We share the goal of a diverse workforce, but believe it should be our newly restaffed Office of Educational Equity under the supervision of Superintendent Guillory, not an employment contract that sets and executes equity policy," end quote. So what I would like to ask you is why not? Why shouldn't we do everything we can? It's not as though there's any rule that says contractual language should not be part of retaining a diverse workforce. We're asking you to work with us against systemic racism and make Brookline a district that not only recruits a diverse workforce, but upholds and affirms the individuals and employees. Here's a hard truth about Brookline Public Schools. It is a place and a community where many of our Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian Pacific Islander, and other staff members of color experience microaggressions regularly, where our BIPOC staff members bear incredible undue burdens and responsibilities, where educators are often the only person of their ethnicity in a professional learning group, on a teaching team, or even in their whole school building. Brookline is a community with students and families from so many different cultures and ethnicities, but whose students may go through their entire pre-K through 12 education having only white teachers. We need to do more than share a goal in abstract. We pride ourselves on being a diverse community. Let's be the district with the most forward-thinking plan for diversity. Let's be leaders in this initiative right now. And if you need any more evidence about why we need to do everything we can, please review that report and that presentation earlier this evening by Xavier Varsky-Elnor. We cannot reach our full potential as an exemplar of public education without drastic change in this area. The fact that you are dismissing an incredible opportunity to create, uplift, and affirm a truly diverse workforce, it is disheartening. I hope that you will have an honest and courageous discussion before you decide to absolve yourselves of the responsibility of doing everything within the parameters of your considerable influence to begin to reverse long-held and faulty systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. Anne, you're up, and then Kevin McKenzie.
Thank you. My name is Ann Collins, and I'm a librarian at the high school and a member of the BEU. When Superintendent Guillory spoke to the high school staff during our opening days, he said, "To recruit, hire, and retain the best teachers, you have to pay them." I believe this was in response to the ongoing contract negotiations. Of course, I agree with this statement. I believe that many of you listening tonight, including school committee members, also agree with this statement. It's really just common sense. A school system can coast only so long on its reputation. When my daughter graduated from BHS in 2013, her largest class consisted of 26 students. Today, our largest classes have grown to 35 students. This is unprecedented in my 18 years with the public schools of Brookline. We are understaffed and morale is at an all-time low. We have received a 1% salary increase in 2 years. Please don't confuse the teacher salary step structure with cost of living raises. The step structure represents the earning potential over a teaching career. It is a well-established system recognized and used by public schools throughout the country. It is a standard in the profession. Contract negotiation after contract negotiation, we are told that there is no money for percentage increases. And then after a year or so of negotiating, money is found. I'd like us to consider that something is broken. Consider these questions directed at the school committee members. What is the budgetary process that you go through to ensure there's adequate money available to bargain in good faith with the teachers union? Do you submit a proposed budget to the town, or are you just told what your budget will be? Is this process transparent? Is this broken? What percent of the town budget is dedicated to the schools? Should this be greater? Have you looked at allocations in comparable communities? Where and what are the stumbling blocks to a smoother systemic outcome that supports our teachers as they do the work to maintain the reputation of the public schools of Brookline? We cannot do it without your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Kevin is up next, and then Lindsay Linton.
Hello, my name is Kevin McKenzie, and I am an educator at the Lawrence School. Tonight, I am speaking to express my severe disappointment that the school committee only scheduled a single negotiation session with the Brookline Educators Union. The BEU offered incredible flexibility to the school committee's negotiation subcommittee in scheduling additional sessions beyond that single session for January the 10th. These offers were declined. With one session, I do not see how we can break this deadlock at the negotiations table, as both sides were ordered by the state to do. This can only be resolved by meeting with one another. I urge you to schedule additional sessions with the negotiations team representing Brookline educators. Meetings between the school committee and the BEU will go a long way to rebuilding trust on both sides. Further, I want to speak out in favor of joint labor management committees. These bodies bring rank and file educators together with district leadership in order to problem solve. We have many problems facing us as a district, from staffing shortages to unsustainable workloads to challenges maintaining a diverse workforce. Together, we can come to the table and work to find solutions to these problems through these committees. Beyond that, I look forward to the listening sessions previously mentioned. In addition to that, you are always welcome in my classroom, room 315 at the Lawrence School. One quick final note. When you meet with my negotiations team on January the 10th, I ask that you speak. I am tired of hearing from your lawyer, Liz Valerio. I am tired of hearing her insult educators with hearsay and bogus claims she makes without providing any meaningful evidence, if any evidence at all is offered. In addition to teaching in Brookline and loving its students, I live in this town. You are my elected officials. I want to hear from you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kevin. Lindsay, you're up, and then Jessica Winder-Schubel.
Hi, good evening. Happy New Year. So my name is Lindsay Winton, and I am a paraprofessional at the Brookline High School in the Special Education Department. And I also have 3 students who go to the Ruffin Ridley School who are in the 2nd, 5th, and 7th grade. And I'm coming on here and I'm speaking to you as real as possible and as from the heart as possible. And I'm coming on here because as a single mother and a woman of color, I see the need that Brookline needs more educators of color. And I'm coming on here because I want you not to just listen to what I'm saying, but actually hear and understand and do the work that was said that was going to be done. You have students like Azavia, who has to come in here as a junior to speak to you and tell you that we need educators of color. A student shouldn't have to take her time out of her own evening to tell people who have been on a committee for probably the years that she's been in school that we need educators of color. That's the only way that we can understand these students. That's the only way that they can feel comfortable waking up in the morning. How early do they have to wake up? Earlier than most, 5:30 a.m. I was a METCO student myself when I was in school. 5:30 a.m. we had to be up to make sure that we were in school on time and making sure that we were there. And still at the end of the day, we still got little smart remarks and racist remarks and from educators who didn't understand our struggle. At the end of the day, I don't want my children to have to be like Azavia, a junior. I don't want my 7th grader to have to wait till she's a junior to be able to speak to her teacher, for her teacher to understand who she is and what she needs. My students now struggle to be able to speak to their teachers because they feel that sometimes they don't understand them. And that's a problem as a mother. Because as a mother, as a single mother, I already have so much on my hands, so much on my shoulders, and I know that I have to move these girls in a way that I know best. But it would be great to know that there's an educator that understands them, that knows their everyday struggle, that knows what they do from the time that they wake up to the time that they close their eyes, to know that they may not go to bed at a normal time because at the end of the day, they may not get home at a normal time because of all the travel that they have to do. We need educators who understand that. We need educators who are not going to think that sometimes the words that come out of their mouth may not be racist, but you know what? It is, because somebody else is thinking something else. Everybody's perspective is not a one-way perspective. So I'm hoping and I'm praying that the school committee finally sits down and listens and understands that in order for Brookline to become powerful, in order for Brookline district to become powerful and stronger, and to be that district that I know it can be and once was, that you need those educators, and no, it shouldn't be put on the students' hands because they have enough on their shoulders. They have enough to walk through the halls and deal with. This should be a thing where the few educators that you have of color should come together and be like, this is what you need and this is what needs to be done, and to make sure that the pay is right, because every educator is worth more what they get, worth more than what they put forth. And as a single mother who now has to work 3 jobs just to make it to live it in Brookline, I would hope and pray that Dr. Guillory and all the school committee and every person out there is truly listening to the heart and the passion that is coming out of my voice, because that's the only time that I can really give it to you. And I thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I hope and pray that we're not listening, but you're truly hearing what is being said. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. And Jess, you're our last speaker.
I had to unmute. Thanks, Suzanne, and thanks to the BEU members that have spoken. Thank you, Lindsay. I say hello again and welcome every opportunity that I can to speak with you, dedicated members of our school committee. It just seems very important to acknowledge this anniversary of the hate-filled insurrection at the Capitol, facilitated by social media's monetizing of depictions of people that are decontextualized, manipulated caricatures. The BEU's commitment to open bargaining, and we would add open grievances, are rooted in a set of values that invite people to hear one another's experience, their ideas, their vision, and all of its richness and nuance. And I thank these educators for doing that. You know, the caricatures of me on Facebook, for example, and facile dismissals overlook the substance of the union work that I and other BEU officers, activists, and members that you're hearing tonight are devoting themselves to day in and day out. It was the union, by the way, that deserves thanks for determining those DESE masks and expired tests were making their way through the system. It is our effort to put commitments to racial equity into contracts so that there are a measure of accountable commitment to structural change around systemic racism. We aren't going to give that one up. Like you, we dedicate ourselves to our school community and beyond, and to the values of solidarity, which are expressions, as I know you know, of a deep and sincere commitment to one another, our students, their families, the community at large. And when we ask you to commit in writing to jobs that can be sustained and pay that can match the demands on people in the current moment in this society, we're building a model that we also think the parents of our students deserve on their jobs. I've been asked to share a few words from a Lincoln school member of the union of the bargaining unit, the teachers, Hillary Rosenzweig, a single parent like Lindsay, who is at a second job tonight. Every day, the activists of the BEU are dedicating themselves to bringing about change that will enable her to survive with dignity as she serves the children of Brookline. If that results in us being labeled radicals and as a term of opprobrium, I guess so be it. Hillary tells us she's a 30-year veteran educator in PSB in the Brookline Public Schools, unable to meet her financial obligations on her salary. There's a gender piece there. I have multiple certifications and collegial degrees, including 45 credits beyond a master's degree. I'm at the top of the pay scale, and I cannot independently afford rent. I live each month highly concerned with the dramatic rise in rental costs, groceries, and gas. I work a second job Monday through Thursday, 3:30 to 7, to be able to pay my expenses and afford college for my 2 boys. This is not sustainable. Is this how we treat a committed educator in a top performing district? It's time to pay for the education that Brookline receives. Thanks, Suzanne.
Thanks, Jess. That concludes public comment. We heard from all teachers today, or educators, and we heard your passion and your concerns. And so thank you for speaking and giving us your time tonight. We are now going to move on to our current issues presentation. Our first one is our report on disproportionality. I think we're turning it over to Casey. Is that true, Casey?
That is true. Thank you, Suzanne. Erin is going to help me out with the slides. So whenever you're ready, Erin, you can pop them up and I'll get started.
Yep, give me 1 second.
So for the new committees and new committee members, and a reminder for committee members who were here last year, I presented on significant disproportionality back in June with a promise to come back this year with, bye Claire, thank you, with periodic updates throughout the school year. So this is one of our updates. Next slide, please. So I'll start off with just some quick highlights on our agenda from our June presentation, and then go into some updates in terms of what we've done since June, especially with Leslie Ryan Miller coming on and leading OTL. So one of the key highlights, I want to remind folks of where the disproportionality lies in the district specific to special education, is that our district was cited for having a significant disproportionate number of Black and African American students identified with a specific learning disability in special education. I highlighted this back in June and want to highlight again tonight that this SLD, capital S, L, and D, is a particular learning disability. It's a category, it's a type of a learning disability. So it's not just a general term for all learning disabilities. This is a specific population, a subset of students who've been identified as needing special education services and diagnosed with what's called a specific learning disability. Of the about 18% of students who are in special education in PSB, 21% of students in special ed are diagnosed with an SLD in our district, and 20% of this group identify as Black or African American. Now, SLD rates nationally hover around 35%, but significant disproportionality is calculated using PSB's own data. And so the way that DESE identifies a district as having a disproportionate number of students under a certain category is they calculate what's called a risk ratio. And what they do is that they take a total number of students identified, divided by a total number of students in that race category. And so in the 1920 school year, a district would have been flagged if its risk ratio for a particular racial or ethnic group in the particular category was 4.0 or greater for each of the previous 3 years. And so PSB was actually at risk with between a risk ratio between 3 and 3.9 for the school years. I would have to go back, forgive me, but these are in my office and I've been home the past couple of days sick, but I think it's the 17-18, 18-19, and 19-20 school years. Now, DESE moves the goalpost every few years. So it went from 4.0 to 3.0 as a risk ratio in the 2021 school year. I hope I'm making sense, and I'm happy to answer questions. I know, Stephen, you had questions about this last year when I presented, but I'm hoping I'm being a little bit clearer. But because we were a risk ratio under 4, we were at risk for 3 years. And then because DESE moved their risk ratio from 4.0 and lowered it to 3.0, we were still at 3.0. And so now we are officially out of the at-risk category, but unfortunately labeled as now having a significant disproportionality. So just want folks to know the difference, because the data is out there on the DESE website, but not exactly the clearest in identifying when their risk ratio was moved. Next slide, please. So during the 1920 school year, we did form a working group of a number of different positions across the district. And what we did was looked at the student profile that made up this group of disproportionate students falling under this particular category. And what we wanted to do was to see who was being over-identified and what are the trends. And you'll see some of the key pieces that we pulled here from the student profile. And what stood out to us, and I want to point your attention to the last 2 bullets here. Here's 13% of students moving in with an SLD determination. Now, these are students who are coming from other cities and towns across the state and even out of state, already having been identified as needing special education with an SLD determination. What this tells us is that PSB, so we ourselves are identifying most of these students with a specific learning disability and qualifying them for special education. And what that tells us is that we need to look at our practices, policies, and procedures for identifying students with an SLD and qualifying them for special ed services. This last piece here, that 45% of the students who fell into this over-identified category did not receive a general education intervention. And so what this tells us is that we have to look further into our child study team practices to see how many of these students were referred to the child study team process. And if they were, what did the team look at in terms of the students' learning profile, and why 45% of them weren't considered or didn't receive an intervention via general ed. Next slide, please. Just a quick reminder for folks in terms of what a child study team is. So typically when a teacher is having difficulty with the student in their class, they may try several strategies to see if the difficulties can be resolved with their own strategies. And if the student isn't showing expected growth, that's when a teacher may refer a student to a child study team. Child study teams are led by school-based staff members. They receive training, they are paid stipends, and they meet regularly. They are all made up of multidisciplinary groups, and what they do is they really look at each student case and they study what the student's strengths and growth areas are. The general education teacher and any other teachers who provide services to the students come also, and they talk through what interventions and strategies should be tried. Teachers are then off to try the recommended strategies and interventions, and then come back with student data to see if students have been responsive to the suggested strategies and interventions. Another key piece covered in the June's presentation that I wanted to remind folks of is that there are different routes for an evaluation for special education. There are direct referrals. Typically, we see these coming in from parents, guardians. Another referral source in our district is through the CSTs, and at the high school, they're called student intervention teams, SIT. And we know how important these teams are at looking at students, and a big focus will be on making sure that these teams have what they need to assess for need, but then also to address them in a way that's culturally responsive too. Next slide, please. So I'll move into some updates since I last presented in June. And what I've done here is offer a graphic of some key pieces at play as we think about reducing this over-identification of this specific subset of the population. Next slide, please. So if we're looking first at a robust Tier 1 literacy and math instruction in all classrooms, here are some updates that through the work of Leslie's office, Office of Teaching and Learning, and mine, the Office of Student Services, we focused a lot on supporting teachers in accessing and using the K-8 essential curriculum. The committee knows that we are rolling out a new math curriculum this year. We have also begun the work of identifying a dyslexia screener. Much of that work we shared during curriculum subcommittee. With the addition of our Assistant Director of Guidance, Clinical Services, and SEL, Dr. Matt Dubois, and the addition of 9 adjustment counselors, we've also amplified our SEL education in each of our classrooms. So this is a bit, really a large chunk that we've bitten off in terms of ensuring that we have robust Tier 1 instruction in our classrooms. Thank you, Erin. If we look at child study teams, what Leslie and I have begun to do is to meet with those who lead the child study teams and learn a bit more from them, what their challenges have been, what makes their work successful in providing interventions and solutions for teachers who have students who are experiencing challenges, and what the CST leaders, and we will be meeting with them regularly this year, have identified is a need for a wider breadth of targeted interventions that they can pull from. They want to expand their toolkits when they are assisting teachers in problem solving. We also talked a lot about the need for data collection and analyzing tools. And again, what we want to do is to free our practices from any implicit biases. Next, please. Great. One of the things that we're also considering is additional training for our literacy specialists, and we're in the preliminary stages, but Leslie and I are looking at potentially bringing in-house trainers in Orton Gillingham for our literacy specialists. In addition to looking at the classroom educator level training for our teachers, and I'll talk a little bit more on what that is specifically as part of the Orton Gillingham program. There are different tiers. The classroom educator one really is more about the acquisition of literacy skills versus providing one-on-one OG sessions. The other thing that we're also monitoring is the rollout of the new math curriculum with an eye towards what additional interventions we should be adding, and of course what training teachers and math specialists would need, and then of course anything that our CST leaders would find helpful as they guide classroom teachers through the CST process. So those are some updates that OTL and OSS have been partnering on throughout the fall. The next slide will outline a little bit of what the special education directors and I have been doing with the ETFs, and then later on in the second half of the year with our special education evaluators. So we look at our work in these 3 different buckets to address significant disproportionality. The first piece is identifying students, and so really looking at the criteria for SLD. What are we using, and are we using it with fidelity? When our evaluators are evaluating students, we want to make sure that our evaluation practices are culturally responsive. And then this last piece on the right here is really about direct service to our students, and really landing on a common understanding of why specially designed instruction is important to ensure that kids are accessing grade level, rigorous gen ed curriculum. And it's a fine balance to strike here when you have students who require specially designed instruction and require discrete skills training, but also ensuring that these students have access to the rigorous curriculum that is being taught in gen ed classrooms to ensure that when our students in special education, or any student really, gets to the high school, they are able to take higher level courses. So that's one thing that is really important to us in the work that we're able to really dig into this year, given how much that OTL has been able to take on to ensure that there is robust tier 1 instruction, but then also tier 2 and tier 3 interventions. Next slide, please. An additional requirement for districts identified with significant disproportionality is that we actually have to set aside 15% of our IDEA funding, which is about a little over $300,000. It's a broad range of activities that we can use these funds for, including PD, direct service to students and supports. And these services actually don't have to just go to the over-identified students, but really services to any students ages grade 3 through grade 12. And the next slide gives us, will give the committee hopefully an idea of what we are considering and some of the things that we have already moved forward on. This first piece on the left here, the first bullet, gives some description of that first level classroom educator training as part of the Orton-Gillingham program, which really just goes through, covers literacy acquisition, the structure of the English language, and gives teachers that solid background in terms of how reading skills are developed. I mentioned earlier that we're in the very preliminary stages of looking at specialized reading intervention training, such as OG for our literacy specialists, continued PD for our CST leaders, our special education evaluators. I know our psychologists have expressed interest in looking at culturally responsive evaluation practices when they are conducting cognitive evaluations. And then Janae and I and Leslie have talked a lot about implicit bias training. There's a lot of research out there on implicit bias and literacy acquisition, and how to bring that forward to our, not just our CST leaders, but our classroom teachers as well. Some of the spending that we're looking at also is additional academic interventions. So that's work with OTL to identify research-based interventions, in addition to CST leader tools, and then of course the dyslexia screener too. So those are just some examples of how we plan to be spending some of that money this year. That is the end of my slides, and of course I'm happy to take questions from the committee.
Yeah, Val.
Thank you, Casey. I have a couple of questions. The first was on the 3.0 and 3.0 ratio. When are we evaluated again against that number?
Yeah, I wish DESE had a clear schedule out. I don't know.
Okay.
When we will, I can certainly find out.
Okay. And then in the when you talked about the SLD and the disproportionality there, was there an overrepresentation of, say, SLD math versus SLD reading within that?
That's a great point. Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. And for folks who don't know, SLD actually breaks down into subcategories. Some students, so it breaks it into reading, writing, and math. And for some student profiles, they'll have just an SLD in reading, one of the three, two of the three, or all three. And when we looked at that, a majority of the students had a disability in reading.
And then my last question was, I think you had said 45% didn't get a gen ed intervention. How does that compare to other students in special education?
I don't know. I would have to look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Okay, thank you.
Andy?
Thanks, Casey. So I think both you and Leslie have at different times emphasized the importance of child study teams. I'm wondering, do we currently have enough of them? Do we currently have enough educators serving on them? And if not, is this an area where the school committee actually needs to move resources in order to, reduce caseloads or just, get the work done?
Andy, could you ask that question? Could you restate what you said?
Sure. It's just I'd heard at different times Casey and Leslie both emphasize the importance of these child study teams. I was asking, do we currently have enough of them, or do we have enough people willing to serve on them? And is this an area where the school committee, in doing our budgeting, for example, needs to actively kind of move resources into this in order to support the work?
Yeah, that's really a great question. So one thing that struck me, I have to say, about our CST leaders when they were introducing themselves at our last meeting is how many of them have led CSTs for many years, 10 plus years. And this year, unfortunately, in particular, they are not finding as much interest. I think, you know, we've talked about this over and over again, but it's a tiring year for educators, anybody in public education this year. So the teams are not filling up as quickly as we have seen in the past. I do know that Leslie has requested additional funding in the budget to raise the stipends. And Leslie, feel free to jump in if I'm misspeaking here, to increase their stipends, hopefully to attract more folks to join the CST.
Yeah, I can jump in, Casey. I think that the capacity of the CSTs really varies by school in terms of the number of members. One thing I can say is the CST leader as well as the CST member job requires an incredible amount of work. It's participating in the actual CST meeting. It's being a liaison between the teacher that is bringing a student to the table at CST. That requires a lot of work. And so one of the things we're really looking at is the stipend actually, does it match the amount of work that we're asking the CST leaders and members to do? And so one of the things that I'm looking at is at our title grants to see if there is any additional funding that we can move over. And I'll be doing the work with Linus, the team, and hopefully collaborating with the BEU around looking at the stipend and if we need to increase that to make sure that it is it matches what we're asking this team to do, especially because we see this team as really high leverage in this disproportionality work and just the work overall of supporting students and educators.
David and then Stephen.
Yes, thank you for that presentation, Casey. You mentioned at one point trainers for literacy specialists. And I think that they would be coming from outside the district. Is that correct? And what would be their role? Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So we haven't identified a vendor yet, but what we're hoping to do, it's not inexpensive to have folks be OG trained. And it also takes more than 12 months for that to happen. And so one way that districts can get a higher number of folks trained is to have folks come in and have a training for 20 plus folks versus sending folks out individually to different vendors. So that's what I meant by having trainers come in.
And if I could just jump in, Casey, David, one of the things we're always trying to do is just build our internal capacity in the district. And so, you know, to Casey's point, I don't see any trainers or consultants that come in. We're really looking at a train the trainer model or how we just build our internal capacity to do this work. And, you know, we haven't settled on a vendor. There's a lot of discussions that we need to have with our literacy specialists and our CST teams around what they need. But the hope is to build the toolkit of our interventionists and our teachers so that if a kiddo comes forward and they need something specific, we can offer them what they need.
Thank you.
Stephen?
Thanks. Thanks, Casey, for that presentation and for providing so many details. It's appreciated. I just have two questions, really just one clarifying question and one comment. The first question is about timeline. I know we're required to provide some additional analysis of some of the factors that drive disproportionality in the district. Do you have a sense? I have no idea when we owe that to DESI or when that's planned. Can you just speak a bit to what further analysis your office is planning to do?
Sure. So it seems like it will be a guided process through DESI. So DESI has contracted with, I'm forgetting the name, but they were the folks who put on the professional learning communities for us 2 years ago at this point during the 1920 school year when we had a working group. So our first meeting with them is the 13th, so next week, when they will go over that process and the timelines with us. And I think that's when they'll guide us through the analysis of the PPPs, which you wrote about, which is our policies, practices, and procedures, which we've already started to do. So looking at CST, looking at the identification process with our evaluators. So we have already started some of that work, but I suspect I'll have more information at my next update once we've begun to attend these PLCs. And we have representatives both from OTL and OSS joining the PLC, which is required, I should add, from DESE.
Okay, thanks for that, Casey. The other, I just want to make one comment also. I brought this up the first time too. First of all, thanks for providing that detail on our weighted risk ratios. It's heartening to see that they're going down, even if we're still in the we're still over the new red line from DESE. I have this lingering concern that it didn't start with me. I heard it from others and became a concern of mine as well, which is that in correcting for disproportionality, there's often the risk that you'll start underreporting, that people that at the building level, there will be, despite good intentions, there will be some internalized feeling that we're under pressure to start reducing the number of Black and brown students who are referred to special education programs. Can you talk a bit about how your office thinks about that and how we can ensure that in mitigating disproportionality, we don't end up underreporting?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. This is something that Leslie and I talk about a lot, and where we land is regardless of the label or whether or not a student has a plan, we have to ensure that our educators have the tools to intervene with whatever they're seeing in front of them. And so for us, it's really about making sure that we have a menu of interventions to address the different learning styles that we're seeing, and addressing the different challenges that our students have. And that's why there's so much focus right now on the CST process, but then also once a student goes through that process, do we have stuff in the classroom? Do our teachers have the right training to actually give the kids what they need? And right now I would say that we don't have that, or it's not as much as we need.
Thank you again, Casey.
And Stephen, if I could just jump in, I think one of the other things that will really, I think your question is a great one, and it's one that I'm concerned about. And I think that the way that we look at data is a really important piece of this, so that we're constantly looking at, has a child made adequate improvement? And so I think that that's a big piece of the conversation. And if a child has not, then it is the law that we need to evaluate them. But we want to do that. We want to do that in a data focused way. And so let's say we have a child who is 2 years behind grade level, right? But they're in an intervention where they're making a year's worth of growth in a year. What does that mean? Does that mean that we need to evaluate the child? I would argue not. I would argue that we can continue with whatever intervention we've put into place if we're seeing growth. And so those are the kind of data-driven conversations I think that we need to be having regularly. And I also can't say enough. I mean, I think this really speaks to a lot of what Azavia talked to us about today, that the instructional work and the implicit bias work and anti-racism work must be coupled together. They're not separate. They have to be done in tandem in order to make sure that we're really addressing the disproportionality head on.
And I might say, piggybacking on Stephen, it's not just under-reporting, it would be under-identifying and under-serving. And to your point, Leslie, there is some bias that can come in, and whether we don't identify them as students needing extra help, or we say, our expectations are lower, for instance, and we would not provide the extra help. So there's a lot to unpack there and to figure that out as you go forward. I was wondering about that 45% that did not receive general ed intervention. These are students who are struggling, but we did not give them extra help and they went straight to special ed. Is that what that number is?
That is, they went straight to a special ed evaluation.
And we did nothing for intervention before we brought them to special ed.
We don't have record of them having received a general intervention. An example would be LLI. And so a good number of these students did not receive LLI.
Okay, so I would think that would be something really to dive deep into, why we would have children that we think are not doing well and would refer them directly to special ed when in fact, we have general ed interventions that would be helpful to them, and perhaps that's what they need.
That's right. And I think this is what the CST leaders had brought up too, is that it could have been the case that there wasn't one that matched what they were seeing, that there wasn't an intervention that matched what the student may have needed.
But that's on us to find that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Jennifer.
I'm sort of just continuing that train of thought and that question, Suzanne. I was just wondering if we know how many of those might be direct parent requests for evaluation versus internal sort of students bubbling up, and also just to reiterate, that we really need to, have a repertoire of interventions that we can provide students before we get to evaluation. But at the same time, I want to echo Stephen, making sure that we're not under evaluating. And so like that, to me, that sweet spot is in the CST process or the SIT process, and the intervention blocks is where a lot of that really good work, I think, can happen when you have a team of educators and professionals who are coming together to look at what students need and how can we best meet those needs. So I'm really excited about the work, really diving into what's happening with CST teams, how we can, support that process, how we can streamline that process. What does paperwork look like? All of that. What are the things that we can offer? And I really think being able to bring in that train the trainer model for some things like OG and other potential resources that we could offer a wider range of students is also exciting news to hear that we're moving in that direction.
Suzanne, can I follow up on that really quickly?
Sure.
So this is building off what you just said, Jennifer, and you, Andy. I have never heard anything other than praise given to CST processes and great hopes that CSTs will strengthen the whole system. Can we go back to Andy's question? What would it look like to strengthen them right now? Whether there are additional allocations that would make a meaningful difference? Is it around stipends? Is it around more than stipends? Are there additional kinds of resources that CSTs would meaningfully benefit from? Because it really looks like the locus of improvement around a number of issues.
Yeah, I think it has to do with the resources, as Casey mentioned, making sure that they have access to the right interventions to offer. I think sometimes our CSTs feel as if they just don't have a lot of options to offer, and they're struggling to think of, how can I support this teacher? How can I support this student? And we want them to have a lot of tools in their toolkit. I think time is always an issue. Being a teacher is hard work, and this work happens outside of the school day, or sometimes happens during the school day, sometimes during a CST members prep, let's say, if they're going to support another colleague and they let's say maybe want to observe a child, then that's taking time. And I do think that this is a place where I'm talking with senior leadership about how do we at a minimum, so there's the additional resources and making sure everyone's well resourced, but also making sure that we're compensating people for their time properly so that they want to do the work, they don't mind doing the work. And so again, that's going to be a conversation amongst us, and we're going to need to also have that conversation with the BEU as well.
Thank you.
Ellen, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just was thinking as you were talking, how many students in a year go through the CST process across the district? And is it just pre-K through 8, or It goes pre-K through 12.
Yep. So it's K to 12. And at the high school, we call it a student intervention team versus a child study team, but the process is very similar. And Helen, you know what, that's a really good question. I mean, I think it also depends on our schools have different numbers of teams. I know that, you know, when I was the principal at Pierce, I advocated for a third CST when at one point when we were at 900 students, our CST was so backed up, and, you know, the Office of Teaching and Learning at the time supported us and gave us a third team. I think those are the questions we need to ask each school is, you know, what is the timeline for students getting picked up, for people getting support, and we may have to do some revamping based on what we hear from folks.
Because I think it would help all of us in terms of, you know, also, I mean, I see the need, that's not the question, but what, you know, what is the depth of the need? You know, do we have, I don't know, 100 kids a year that go through it, or 1,000 kids a year that go through it? I just don't even know the amounts. And so that would be helpful to know those numbers. And I think you could probably get those together at some point.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you.
Will do.
Val, do you have your hand up?
I do. Just a follow-up, Casey. Based on what you said about disproportionality and that the SLD reading, it seems like many of the interventions are going to be literacy based. And so my question is about how much time you think we need to ramp up to operationalize those interventions, given what you said about OG training and things of that nature, and training the trainer and that work that has to be done.
Yeah, I mean, I think OG is probably is the most time intensive. There are certainly other intervention programs out there that are shorter and not as time intensive that we're looking at. I mean, overall, I'd have to get back to you on a timeline in terms of how quickly we could operationalize this. I have to give a lot of credit and shout out to Leslie leading her team and moving so many bodies of work that have needed to move forward in general ed for so long that I feel like we have pushed the big boulder and now we're catching some momentum, and I'm hoping I can have more concrete answers for you in our next update.
I mean, I think it helps both in terms of program planning, but also fiscal planning, sort of multi-year fiscal planning.
For sure. Yeah, we certainly have some ideas and are putting numbers and dates to things. I don't have access to all of that right now, but we certainly feel the urgency.
Jennifer, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back around and I'm thinking also about what Helen was just saying about looking at the number of students who may go through the CST process in a given year, and maybe looking at those numbers to see how many led to an evaluation, and also as a way to sort of look at the success of an intervention model, because lots of students also can go through CST and not go to an evaluation because we found interventions that are really successful for students. So, you know, that's also there. I'm sure there are successes in there as well. So just sort of looking at those numbers of students that are in CST, and then the number, I wanted to go back to that question I had earlier, and I'm sure we don't have an answer right now, but the number of direct parent requests for evaluation versus internal evaluations. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then about the resource and the budgeting piece, sometimes interventions, you know, are in the classroom, and sometimes they're small groups that might be operating outside the classroom. So when we think about resources, there's like materials and training and PD and the stipends and the time, and then the people not only that serve on CST, but the number of interventionists that we might need in order to support classroom educators in meeting those needs. That's also really tricky. Sometimes, you know, situations where we you know an intervention and you know how you can do it, but there's just not enough bodies to do all the work. So I just want us to I bring this up so that we can think about that, so we can make sure that we do what we can in the budgeting process to meet those needs from a school committee level.
Andy?
Yeah, thanks. So I think in your June presentation, Casey, you mentioned that the percentage of Asian students who are in special education is way low, like less than half of their proportion of the student population. So I'm wondering, like, the work that you guys are doing now, is it shedding any light on whether we have a problem there of under-identification and possibly kids not getting what they need?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, Andy. Actually, I did. The directors poured into the files a little bit more over the summer, and what they found. And again, this is samples of looking at students who were evaluated, our AAPI students, and what they found is that a student who identifies as AAPI might go through the special ed evaluation process, may qualify for special education, and then the parents or guardians don't actually move forward with an IEP. And so the process at that point, if we don't get consent for an IEP, doesn't move forward. And then this brings us back to that question of, like, what then do we have then that's not special ed that can still address the challenges that we're seeing? And this is the piece where we're finding holes that we need to begin filling. And that's one of the things actually that we have been thinking about in terms of spending the 15% of our IDEA funding is to sort through and filter for students who qualify for special ed, but families elected to not have them be placed on IEPs. How are they doing currently, and what more could we be doing for them?
I'm sure you probably have this, but do we have Asian Americans who are explaining to some of these parents who may not be familiar, some may not, some may be as familiar with the American system about what it means? And, you know, because I remember when I was in Japan, they just treated kids who had special needs. The mother had to come and sit with the kid in the classroom. You know, that was their way of dealing with a child who was acting out, or you know. And so I'm wondering how, you know, that maybe the cultural sensitivity may not be there in terms of explaining what we can offer.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I know we have interpreters who come to our meetings, but in terms of that really nuanced piece of explaining, I don't exactly know what the level of skill is there. But you're right in noting that there is a cultural piece there to sort of solidifying or putting on paper that a student has a disability.
Right.
David?
On the same subject, I'm wondering, do we know what the general education intervention numbers look like for this population?
Can you restate the question differently?
So we heard that at least in many instances, Asian families are not proceeding with an IEP. So I'm wondering if we know what percentage of those families, the students, are receiving general education interventions.
I don't know that.
But we could find that out, David. We just don't have that number for you this evening, but we could let you know that.
So I'm just struggling a little bit in terms of, you know, the gaps in terms of our interventions. I would think our literacy specialists have a fair number of intervention tools in their tool bag. I mean, don't they have strong tier 2 intervention tools? No? What are they doing in tier 2 interventions?
Yep. So I think that they do. I think, though, that what we know is that just the acquisition of literacy is complex and that students have really varying needs. And do we always have the resources and the capacity and personnel to carry out what every student needs? And so that's what we really need to examine. And I have to go there again. It's not just about the interventions. It's also about checking our systems for implicit bias, for anti-racism. And when I say that, I'm not just talking about our educators. I'm talking about all of us, right? All of our systems. We have to check our systems for equity. And that's also going to be really impactful. So it's really a combination of many things, to be honest, Suzanne.
Janae, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and add, and Casey said this already, but we are definitely in constant conversation about that marriage that Leslie's talking about, because we know that implicit biases exist. We know that about the structural racism that is impacting choices that are being made, and along with the resources that our CST and SIT members need, we all need these. Constant revisitation of what it means to retrain our own minds around our unconscious biases, what that looks like in practice on a daily basis. The conversations that we have with one another, the conversations that we have with our families, which our special educators do such amazing work with constantly, and our general educators do too. But then also the conversations that we're having with students, the conversations they're having with one another, and how we're moving forward in all of these things. And so again, we can't divorce that piece from this, as much as OG and the resources that our reading specialists have and our ELA teachers bring to these conversations, and our math teachers and math specialists. We're continuing to work toward making sure that conversation is lockstep each time. So that's part of that.
No, I'm happy to hear that, because, if you're just looking at OG or those kinds of tools, it's not going to solve the problem alone. That's not the only piece of the puzzle that we have to solve here. So I'm happy to hear that, it's a combination, but I do think a lot of our literacy interventionists do have quite a few tools for interventions. I would be surprised if they did not have training in that. Okay, who else has a thought? Because this is actually leading into our next presentation, which is early literacy. So it's kind of all related, I think. So are we ready to move there? Yeah, Susan.
Yeah, I just want to ask one really brief question. This has been a terrific conversation. I mean, I'm just sort of really thinking about the question of communication, of kind of to what extent the general public or our students understand the extent to which we are analyzing our information, acting on our information, and doing things. I was just really, again, struck by our student who raised very important issues, most of which we've talked about before. And I guess I'm sort of feeling that a disconnect between kind of how much people understand about what we're talking about and what we're doing, so that their comments can be more specific to us in terms of saying, okay, you guys are doing, we all agree this is an important issue. Here's what the district is doing. We have sort of a common knowledge base about what the district is doing. And then their comments are so much more impactful to us, because it kind of says you're not doing it right, or you're doing it, with the wrong kind of intervention, or whatever that is. And it's a little bit less with special education specifically, but not necessarily, because I think the parent experience is just really important on this one. So I want to make sure it doesn't come across as sort of devaluing those comments when we hear them. Rather, I would want to say, how do we make those comments as impactful as possible on actual decisions, and that we're considering. So I'm not sure if that made sense, but I'm kind of struggling with that a little bit after our conversation earlier in the meeting.
Okay, you gave us pause, gave us reason to pause and think about all that, Susan. Thank you. I'm not seeing the response. So why don't we move on to literacy, if we can, Leslie, and still think about what Susan is saying.
Sure, and I could jump in. I was thinking about what you said, Susan. I wasn't sure if you wanted to answer immediately or if it was just something for us to consider. But I will say, I think communication is always something that we can work to get better at. And something I certainly heard when we met with the CPAC members was just in terms of the child study teams, having a good understanding of what does that work look like? What does it mean when a child goes to a child study team? What happens? And I think that's a concrete example of a place where we could really ramp up our communication just to show and share the work that's being done. And as well as just get more parent perspective in the work too. So that's just one example, but as Suzanne said, yes, it gives me pause and it's something to think about, but I think communication is always a place where we're looking to continuously improve. All right, so I'm going to jump into early literacy. I'm really excited to present the work that is happening in the classroom with our educators, the district level work that Joanna Lieberman, our K-8 curriculum, ELA curriculum coordinator, is leading. One of the things that I think is really important to know, and I said it earlier, the art of teaching reading is incredibly complex. And what we know is that our students have very different needs. We have students that come into our kindergarten classrooms that are emergent readers. And we also have students that come into our kindergarten classrooms who are avid readers already. And so it's really making sure that all students get what they need so that they are continuously growing and showing improvement in whatever area of growth they have. One of the things that, especially lately, we know is that literacy is just a really evolving field, and we're always getting new information. And one of the things that I am really thankful about is that Joanna is really on top of that research. She's thinking about it all the time. She's sharing it with us all the time. And our program is not stagnant. We're always looking at our program, thinking about what our strengths are, thinking about what our areas for growth are. And we continue to evolve, as does the research and what we know our kiddos need as well. So I'm not going to delay here. I'm going to turn it over to Joanna, and she's going to walk us through some slides, and then we'll be happy to take some questions at the end.
Thanks, Leslie. I think Michelle's going to share the screen. I'll let her go into slideshow mode. So this is a presentation that's really sort of a status report of where we are with literacy in K-5 ELA. A version of this was shared with Subcommittee at the end of 2021. So I'll just share it going forward. Thanks. So talk briefly about 5 areas tonight: the architecture of ELA and literacy in the district, an overview of reading and writing, our content and pedagogy, which was largely what was shared at Subcommittee, a little bit about materials and assessment tools that we use, kind of where we are in our own programming here in PSB, and then a little bit of considering conversations in the field. As Leslie mentioned, this is an ever evolving sort of body of knowledge and body of practice, which makes it a really exciting world to live in and be in. And it keeps us on our toes because it's changing and growing all the time. Okay, so just if I can talk briefly about what we're calling the architecture of our program. You can think about these as kind of 4 pillars that make our literacy teaching and learning go here in PSB. The first one is responsive literacy teaching and learning. This is at the heart of what we do. We are really looking to always be emphasizing engaging instruction and creating meaningful time for students to practice reading, writing, speaking, and listening. That's the core of what we are, that we are always looking inside of this design to know that reading, writing, and language development happen along a developmental continuum, and it's not a linear process where you just move from A to B. Students are moving along that continuum all the time and in different places at different times. That what we want to be doing is having a balance between whole group, small group, and individualized instruction for purposeful reasons and using those structures in very pointed ways. that we have to have support for the systematic development of foundational skills. So that's phonological, phonemic awareness, and phonics. That has to sort of go along and undergird all the work that we do, and that we have to use and interpret a range of assessment data so that we can understand and plan for our instruction going forward. The second piece is spiraling. I'll just stay on this line, Michelle, thanks. A spiraling standards-based ELA literacy curriculum. And for us right now, what this means is we have anchor units of study in reading and in writing. We have 3 units of study, K-8 in reading and 3 in writing. All together, those 3 units in reading comprise about 60 sessions over the course of a calendar school year. So 60 in reading, 60 in writing, and then we have a year-long phonics program in K-2, which really is a sort of an everyday, all day, September to June piece. And then another really important component that we have emphasized a lot is that we really believe that in having a spiraling standards-based literacy curriculum, we need to and must have texts for literacy and content areas that are accessible, culturally responsive, and move across a gradient of complexity. So that's a big part of our piece there. And then it's interesting that my piece here is coming after Casey's presentation on the work that she's doing around some of our disproportionality findings, because we talk a lot about having multiple pathways for literacy learning and really having a systematic plan for those multiple pathways in literacy. So for us, what that means is that our classroom instruction, what we call our tier 1 instruction, has to be able to speak to our tier 2 and tier 3 work in interventions. So kind of what does that mean for us? It means that we have our data selection meetings for students who are being considered for literacy intervention. We're working specifically this year to have really consistent kind of guidelines across the district so that schools are all following a similar pattern and have similar values for how those meetings unfold, for how students are chosen and into those intervention groups. Who's part of that process? What are the educators? What are the literacy professionals? What are the specialists? And who contributes to those conversations? And how are children selected into those interventions? We are increasingly looking to have a variety of intervention tools in the district. We have level literacy intervention. We have Lexia. We have some folks beginning to work with Haggerty phonemic awareness. We have reading recovery. We have additional foundations support. And so we've really grown our our intervention pathways for students. The wonderful thing is that, as you heard, many of our literacy educators sit on our CST teams at schools. And that's really, really important to be able to have folks who can help make that translation between what's going on in the general education classroom, what happens when a child is brought to CST and might need additional support, and a classroom teacher might need that. And so our literacy folks are a big part of those CST conversations. We have progress monitoring to determine when a student is making expected progress, when a student goes into intervention and might make accelerated progress, and when they might need more intensive support in some other way. And then a final piece of this systematic plan is an opportunity for summer literacy programming, which has been around long before I got here and has continued to grow and refine in our summer literacy planning. And the final piece is, I'm going to go one back, Michelle, sorry. The final piece is having collaborative professional learning and growth for educators. We really have worked very, very hard over the last number of years to create a culture within our schools for professional development and professional learning, because as Leslie said, literacy is complex. Learning to read is a complex process, and we have to be engaged in this ongoing learning experience all of the time. So we have, pandemic aside, we have professional development opportunities that are happening regularly with our literacy folks. We have literacy coaching available to teachers in all schools. Again, obviously, as time allows, this is a really difficult year. I don't have to tell everybody here that. And, we want to be mindful also of not having folks be in competition with math rollout and just the demands of the pandemic, but we have those opportunities. We have literacy leadership teams in all of our buildings to help take a look at what's going on with literacy practice, what's happening at the building level literacy data, how we're aligning our literacy information with district goals, that kind of work. And then an emphasis on kind of purposeful collaboration across schools, across grades, across content areas, and really thinking about embracing the idea that we are all accountable to one another for our own continuous improvement in literacy learning, because that's what's good for students. So we'll go on to just a really brief overview. I won't go in as much into depth as I had before, but this is really sort of a visual that we created to give an overview of what reading and writing instruction looks like in our district. What you see on the left is the content, the standards aligned content that is a big part of our essential curriculum. And then on the right are the pedagogical practices that make that content come alive. So in reading, we follow Massachusetts learning expectations, and we have content units of study in reading literature, because we have standards for reading literature and we have standards for reading informational text. So we have units of study in reading literature and in informational text. And then what you see in the center are the configurations of how students are grouped and how they move through a literacy block during the day. They're in whole group instruction, small group instruction, individual instruction. And then on the very far right, you see the practices that align with those configurations. So when the whole group of students is together, that's the time that you might do an interactive read aloud, where you're reading aloud a rich, wonderful text and having planned purposeful pause points that lift comprehension. Or you might have younger students together around a text doing some word reading in a large shared text for shared reading, small group instruction, and then individual instruction. Students are our youngest ones are often working in workboard, moving through centers on their own, or older students who can maybe doing independent reading, conferring with readers. And then what you see underneath it, running across the whole bottom deliberately, is word study, the foundational skill work that goes on and undergirds all of this work. So in K-2, it's foundations, as I've mentioned before, and then in grades 3 to 5, many of our teachers are using Words Their Way, not all, and we know that that's one of the growing edges, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. Writing, which is the next slide, looks very much the same in terms of the structures, the standards align content. In this case, our mass learning expectations have 3 writing strands: narrative writing, information writing, and opinion argument writing. So we have 3 units of study, K-8, that align with those 3 content standards. But again, very much the same structure, those configurations, and then the practices that match with those. And word study goes along the bottom, obviously, because encoding is the other side of the coin to decoding. Okay. And then just briefly, some of the materials and assessment tools that we have. We have foundations in K-2, that's our phonics program. We have a number of teachers across the district who also use handwriting without tears in kindergarten. There's a handwriting component that goes along with foundations. As students learn about letters, they learn letter formation. That piece isn't as strong in first grade and up. So many teachers are finding that they want to continue to supplement handwriting with some of the pieces from Handwriting Without Tears. So that's available to people. We have units of study in reading for fiction and nonfiction, and in writing, as I mentioned before. And then, as I said, a lot of folks are using Words Their Way, but we know that's a part of our program that has to be looked at more deeply. And our assessment materials, that's the next slide. We have a kindergarten assessment program that we built ourselves, which includes letter ID and letter sound ID, which is done twice a year. We have a high frequency word list and then some phonological awareness tasks. We also have Foundations unit tests, which people use kind of along a continuum of use. Words Their Way spelling tests, similarly, the benchmark assessment system, which we're able to do again this year. And teachers use running records a lot in the classroom, which are sort of quick inventories of how accurately students are decoding text. So a little bit of where we are and what we've done to date. So we have worked along with the initiative around essential curriculum to outline some consistent teaching and learning experiences, those units of study and those practices across the district through these anchored curriculum units. So again, it represents about a third of the instructional calendar, those 60 instructional sessions. And we have said that we would like all students across the district to have access to those learning experiences. We've implemented a pathway for phonics instruction, K-2, brought that to the district, and we're now, I believe, in year 5 of implementation of that. Bravo to the second grade teachers who were given foundations materials in the pandemic. They really rose to the occasion and took it on, even though they didn't have our traditional ways of doing PD. They really have embraced it, and we're really grateful for that willingness to take that on. We've broadened our book collections considerably, and we will continue to do that with a focus on culturally responsive texts. That's a big commitment that we have made, and we will continue to grow that. And then the most exciting part, I think the part that I feel most enthusiastic about, is the resources that we've developed internally. We have built our own videos, slide decks, student tools, teacher tools to support implementation of our essential curriculum and some additional curriculum units too. This is, if there is a pandemic silver lining, this is it. The literacy educators and teachers across the district have just amassed an incredible, powerful collection of work that is continued to be shared, used across our entire district. It's incredibly exciting work, and we see folks using it in all different ways. They use it to learn from each other. They use it to compare notes. They build off of those materials. And we're really excited that they didn't disappear with the pandemic. They just continue to grow. And we also have been able to offer some pretty well attended PD last year during the pandemic for sure. And even this year, as hard as this year is, we've had good enthusiasm for a number of the sessions, and coaches and other educators are getting very creative about how they can partner and do some of that professional development work. So what else have we done? As I mentioned before, we've continued to expand our intervention practices. We've moved initially we had LLI and we had reading recovery a number of years ago, and we've continued to grow and expand that as we notice that students have other needs. And I think Casey referenced that when we start to think about, does it make sense? How do we think about supporting other students who may have a sort of a different range of needs? What tools do interventionists need? Do all buildings need to be able to support students? And do we have to continue to broaden that? What else have we done? We've initiated a 3 to 5 word study review and selection process, and we're hoping that by fall we'll be able to have a pilot plan in place to kind of test out what might be a logical next step of those foundational skills in 3 to 5. And what are some of our next steps? I think we're going to explore some phonological awareness programs for intervention settings. I happen to make a classroom observation to a specialist who was doing that with some kindergarten students in a really thoughtful, creative, important way. And so we're starting to see that there might be a role for that, certainly in intervention with our youngest students, and possibly in some classroom instruction, bringing that into some of our kindergarten classrooms. We have to think about what that might look like. We're evaluating the role of reading intervention in kindergarten. What does that look like for kindergarten? What's reasonable to expect? And also in 6 to 8, when the middle school schedule creates a lot more complexity. So what can be effective? How do we know that we're effectively able to structure intervention that will support our older readers? And then we're going to think about taking the findings from the 3 to 5 word study group, which is starting with our literacy specialists this year, and thinking about kind of bringing that into some programming decisions, and with a particular eye on making connections between foundations that kids are experiencing in K-2 and then what comes next. One of the things that's been very interesting that's come out of the pandemic is this understanding that when students had interrupted schooling in 2nd grade and 3rd grade, or 1st and 2nd grade, that what we're seeing when students are coming to us in these older grades that are sort of traditionally outside of the realm of foundations, they're missing some of those skills. So we have to think about that, not just for the students who are in front of us in the next year or two, but kind of going forward, how do we make those connections more deliberate and purposeful? Okay. We also are thinking about the possible role of decodable texts for use in some primary settings. We know that as we have students who are working with foundations, and we put some additional emphasis on word reading and decoding, is there a role for decodable texts? They are somewhat, they're crafted texts. They're not texts that necessarily match what we find out in the bookstore, but there may be a role for helping students bridge between word reading and some of those more complex and continuous text work. So what should we look at? What might we use them, and how can we look at a critical eye on what we would be selecting? And then we're going to be always in an ongoing dialogue with literacy educators about current research and implications for practice. As we said, that's changing all the time, and we need to be updating that. And then finally, Casey mentioned this as well, we're in the process of having the literacy OTL part of the dyslexia screening conversation underway. And just the last bit that I just want to talk to a little bit more broadly outside of PSB is the conversation in the field. We know that literacy and reading instruction is widely discussed, talked about. You can read about it, you can watch it on YouTube, you can participate in it in a whole number of ways. But the incredibly exciting and gratifying part of that whole conversation, I think, when you get a chance to sort of sit back and read and think and watch and engage in all of this, is that by far all of these voices in the field have a lot more in common than not. And one of the exciting things is if you want to put in a good number of hours reading research quarterly, which is a sort of the gold standard of reading research in the field, has done over the last 2 years a 2-issue kind of exploration of reading, the science of reading and reading instruction kind of here in 2020 and beyond. And it's 75 different people contributing to this really exciting, very diverse field of perspectives, and it's really powerful, interesting work. And I think what you walk away from reading those pieces understanding is that everybody shares the same goal here. The goal is to strengthen reading proficiency and to support growth for all students. And everybody, while you may come at it with a different perspective or a different point of emphasis, that's ultimately the goal, and that's incredibly gratifying. I think the other piece that is worth sort of noting is that there's universal agreement that we need to design and implement a differentiated instruction to support a wide range of readers. And you heard a lot of it tonight, that because of reading is such a complex process and the range and needs of our students is so vast that we have to be nimble and we have to be thoughtful and we have to be willing to ever evolve our understanding so that we can meet readers where they are and meet their needs. Sort of all of the authors who are in these 2 issues and in the field would recognize that professional support, providing professional support in terms of professional development, coaching and training for educators to continue to grow their practice that reflects the evolving field of research is also incredibly important. Huge challenge, obviously, that we are facing in a pandemic right now. I think there will be time ahead where it's a little bit clearer how we can do that in a more consistent way, but that has to be a part of it. And we have to have a commitment to deepening our understanding about what's critical to know in the research on reading, right? We want to look at basic research, which is research that often comes from the cognitive and neuroscience. We want to look at applied research, and we want to look at translational research, which means what do you do when you take those findings from basic research and you bring them into real classroom context and school context? And we have to be able to read across both to make really good decisions about what the science of reading is teaching us about reading process, and then what's the science of reading instruction, and how do those two work work together. So I think that's really important. And then finally, I think some valued takeaways. I'm going to have, call them usable takeaways from the conversation in the field is that we probably want to think about some more systematic use of foundational skill assessments to inform our practice. So how are we using some of the ones that are available to us? Are there other ones that we want to be looking at? We have a study group taking a look at that right now too. Are we going to explore the use of decodable text? What does that look like? We also know that we want to be, and this is, I think, a really good piece that's come out of the conversation around science of reading. We really want to be emphasizing with our youngest readers the primacy of word reading skills in content units. So when students, our youngest readers, are starting to read and they are starting to lean into text, we want to look at, do they have, are they relying first on sort of cracking that code and doing that reading work and laying that foundation? So we'll continue to make sure that our work in our content units really emphasizes that. We want to seek opportunities to integrate vocabulary and content knowledge because we know that that matters, that you want to, if you're reading words, you have to map it onto meaning. And how does that work throughout the school day? I've talked before that it can't live inside of ELA instruction alone. We just don't have enough time in the day for that. It has to live in other content areas. And then the other piece is to consider the addition of potentially a formal phonemic awareness program in kindergarten. So I believe that is the piece that I was kind of going to give you an overview. And pause there.
Thank you so much, Joanna. We're happy to take any questions you might have. David?
Hi, thank you very much for that very thorough presentation. Just a quick question on that last part that you mentioned regarding consideration of an addition of a formal phonemic program for kindergarten. Currently, at what grade level is a phonemic program in place? Starting when?
Yeah, so we don't have a formal one in place yet, and that's why we're considering, do we add one such as something like Haggerty, which is a program that's used by a number of our peer districts. Is that something that we should invest in, and we need to do some work in that? Right now, it's more built into the school day, but I don't think it stands alone as an identified integrated part.
Okay, but on an informal level, it's still happening with individual educators?
So is Foundations is not considered our phonics program and phonemic awareness?
It is our phonics program, but I think in terms of thinking really about like hearing and manipulating those sounds, breaking down those sounds, it doesn't do that exclusively, right? It doesn't focus on that as intensively. So it's a lot of mapping it onto the written components too.
I'm just a little concerned about adding more and more things to the plate and to the day.
100%. Yeah, no, I mean, that's the balance here, right?
That's not to say, Suzanne, that we are going to add things. We're really going to talk about what are the needs of students. And so now is the time we're holding feedback sessions with our K-5 educators around the essential curriculum. And this is the place where I really want to hear from educators, what's working, what do they need, what's not. One of the things that I think we can all agree on in Joanna's presentation, she said it's under review. I think that with Foundations, we have some real integration and balance there. I think the place, at least that I'm really thinking about moving first, is in grades 3 to 5. So even when I was the principal of Pierce, I heard from the 3rd grade team often, I have students, they're having challenges with phonemic awareness. What am I supposed to do? What do I have? What resources are available to me? So I think that that's probably the place that we're looking first, but we continue to look at, the wide breadth of our curriculum and materials in all of the grades.
I'm going to call on Helen and then Val. Helen?
Joanna, you mentioned sort of at one point about, ELA can't do it all. Where do you think the integration between ELA and the other disciplines should be happening? How much should we be, teaching ELA through social studies, through science? through math?
That's a very big conversation tonight. I think what I was really referring to in my piece is that we can be mindful of the way that vocabulary and content knowledge can be obviously talked about, addressed, highlighted in science instruction, in social studies instruction, in mathematics instruction, so that it works together with ELA conversations. And I think, I think there's a lot of opportunity for overlap. I mean, one of the things we've talked about is when you have, we've asked for folks to do these units that comprise, as I said, like 60 sessions over the course of a school year. So there's opportunities to think about where those integrated pieces might be happening in between there. And I think there's space in there, but I think it's also the idea that
go ahead. Finish.
Oh, I lost it anyway. I'm not sure.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Fine.
But is that something that you and the other curriculum coordinators are working on?
We have certainly talked about it. I got an email from my social studies colleague about that today, just to have that, and Emily and I for sure talk about that. I think we also have to be mindful of people's bandwidth right now too, and doing that planful work while there's a math program rollout underway, and just really wanting that work. It needs to be done thoughtfully. It needs to be done involving educators, and I think those of us who work with teachers understand how challenging time and space feels right now. And so wanting to be mindful, and you want to do something that feels well supported and teachers feel like they can embrace. And so we're really trying hard to be aware of that. What we did in ELA this year built a lot on what we did last year. So we were able to say to folks at the beginning of the year, much of what we're offering back out to you today, this year for 21-22 is familiar from last year. And I think there's, that's important. That was important this year when there were many other things underway. So for sure it's there, but want to be mindful about how we move forward.
Val and then Stephen.
Thanks. So Joanna, thank you for that. I had a discrete question. When you were talking about, forget if you call it predictive text, or are you talking like CVC?
Decodable text.
Decodable text.
Yeah,
so is that like CVC?
Yeah, so they're texts that are written to kind of correspond very deliberately to phonics patterns that are taught in a phonics program. So that's getting a lot of attention right now in the field, as folks are paying, once again, increased attention to sort of phonics and that piece. And I think there's probably a role for them. They aren't always the most, they're certainly not traditionally have been the most culturally responsive texts. And so we want to be mindful of that. And they can be a little bit contrived, right? Because you're trying to write texts that match phonics patterns. And yet there's probably a role for them in helping students kind of build momentum.
Okay. And then for Leslie, I was just what you said about 3rd to 5th grade was really interesting to me, because that's, I think, where we see a lot of students fall off a cliff a little when they're supposed to be reading to learn rather than learning to read. So I was curious what you were thinking in terms of initial steps of that gap.
Yeah, I think per Joanna's presentation, when she just outlined kind of the word study and just saying in grades 3 through 5, it's under review. I think we want to make sure that our teachers have the resources to really build students' grasp of phonemic awareness and phonics. And right now we have Words Their Way, but I'm not sure that we have all of the supports in place to support an educator with Words Their Way. And I think it's fair to say we're not sure that that's the program we want to move forward with. And so, anytime that we're looking at new materials, curriculum, we want to get educators involved in terms of knowing what the need is, so that we're looking at the research. One of the things that's been really helpful too is just engaging with, we've got some really notable folks in the community in Brookline who know this work really well. And so I've had the chance to connect with some of them, and they've been incredibly helpful. So taking some of that information, seeing what the needs of students are, and finding whatever resources and program is going to be best to meet the needs of students. But I think that that is a place where the phonemic part of things for our kiddos in grades 3 through 5, we really want to bolster that, and we want to really solidify that, but we want to solidify the right resources.
It seems though that it also piggybacks on what Helen was just saying, because to me here, this is sort of the age band where you are reading, say, about photosynthesis, but if you're really just focusing on decoding and getting through the words, you're not learning your science piece, right? So this is, and I think that there are that's where we see a lot of students perhaps really then struggle in other areas.
Absolutely, Val.
Stephen.
Thanks, Suzanne. Just want to start by saying thank you for this presentation. I'm just impressed by how much you've already done since the curriculum subcommittee meeting, where a version of this was presented, but it's clear that you've done a lot of thinking and a lot of talking to people, and you've already started to come up with areas where you want to pivot and reprioritize. And you did that, in December, presumably over some winter break too. So thanks. I'm so impressed with the direction that Joanna, that you and Leslie are moving in. I just have a couple of questions. One is, what was the word study research? Can you just say what that was? I missed it.
Can you say more specifically?
Yeah,
what you're looking
referenced, at? Am I misremembering what it was called? That you
Words
were doing
Their Way, is that the program? Are you saying?
No. That maybe I misunderstood. Is the district doing research itself?
Oh, how are we thinking about choosing some of those programs and taking a look at that? Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm sorry. Perhaps I simply misunderstood. I thought you were saying earlier that we were, as a district, doing research about.
It's probably my use of the term. So I'm fortunate enough to have a tremendously talented body of interventionists and coaches and literacy professionals. And some of the work that we're doing in our monthly department meetings is we're examining 2 pathways, what are some assessments that might inform decisions that we're making about kindergarten and 6 to 8. And then having their expertise brought to bear on how we think about what are some logical, good programs to support phonics and other foundational skills. As you move up through 3rd grade, typically in a sort of a typically developing year, if we ever have one of those again, I don't know, you'd see that students move away from sort of learning the foundational phonics skills and move into vocabulary. They move into morphology and some of those other pieces around word acquisition. So thinking about having those folks take a look at what's out there, what are programs that are available to us, what's thoughtful, and what connects to where students are coming from.
Thank you. For some reason, I thought you were saying that we were doing original research, and I was like,
oh,
what?
yeah.
But it sounds like it's analysis.
I have folks who've done that, but not this year, maybe.
The only comment that I would want to make then is, you mentioned some areas where the district might want to, this is piggybacking on what Suzanne said, some areas where the district might want to consider investing further in developing new interventions. And also, I think, Suzanne, this was also building on your point from the last discussion. To me, it's less a question of where should future investments go than in determining to what extent our existing investments are evidence aligned. And one of the big topics that came up for discussion at the last curriculum subcommittee was around the October 2021 reviews and ed reports of Fountas and Pinnell, which were found not to be meeting state standards. And in general, it was really harsh. And I know, you had units of reading and units of you had F&P and F&P derived stuff in your presentation today. I just want to make sure that when we're determining how to provide the right array of tools, pedagogies, resources, supports, ideas, we're also looking at what ideas were already in the classrooms that may be misaligned with the evidence and maybe providing a contradictory, even potentially confusing experience for some students who are receiving some interventions that are really evidence aligned and appropriate, but perhaps there are some resources around them that don't quite align with that too. So I just want to make sure that that's on the table as we move forward, that we're also taking a good critical eye to what's already in the classroom.
Yeah, and I think, certainly for sure. And I think some of the takeaways from Ed reports are helpful to us. I think it's also really good to understand kind of what Ed reports is all about, and that it's a rubric that's measuring alignment of the materials to the Common Core. And so I think when they don't pass, it's because they're not passing that, kind of threshold. And so I think you look at Ed reports, you take that information into the field. And then, I also spend an awful lot of time looking really hard at What Works Clearinghouse, which is the sort of the gold standard for that. And, consistently, for many, many years running, reading recovery is one of the highest kind of scoring programs in What Works Clearinghouse for raising student achievement and literacy. And so I think LLI also has very high ratings on What Works Clearinghouse. I'm happy to send those reports along to folks if they want to take a peek. And so I think we have to integrate all of that, and that's why as I said, it's an exciting time and it's a fast-moving time in this field. So for sure, we want to learn from all of those pieces and take all those pieces into account.
Thanks,
Ellen.
Yeah, I will ask the question. So I had asked at one point a while back, how much Fountas and Pinnells costs the district, as opposed to some of these other programs like Reading Recovery or Gillingham, or I'm not exactly sure. I'm not a reading specialist. I don't know much about it. It's but
so I'm not. I think I'll jump in. I think you're actually thinking about our ongoing affiliation with Leslie and Literacy Collaborative and the training part that took place. And so we haven't trained folks in a number of years at Literacy Collaborative. So it's the same. You can a lot of the programs that are available out there are sort of fairly consistent in the cost of things.
Okay, so Fountas and Pinnells doesn't have special books and special things you have to buy to be.
I mean, we have material. We have the benchmark assessment system that has been in place in our district. That's not a new cost.
No, I know it's not new. I'm just curious. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I don't say that it's new, but I'm wondering, is it something that we're planning to continue to invest in?
Well, so we have it already. So it's not a new purchase.
Helen, there's not a lot of consumables, what they call consumables. Once you buy it, it's ours. We have the materials. They're not used up each year.
I see.
All right, I need to follow up on that. Are you saying that there are no recurrent costs for F&P materials right now in our schools?
I don't think they're very substantial because, for instance, once we buy a BAS kit, we have it. And let's say a teacher moves on, we still keep the kit. I think, to be honest, some of the greatest costs related to things like BAS are around subcoverage. So BAS is an assessment that requires teachers to work one-on-one with a student, hence needing subcoverage. So I think we're in terms of materials, I don't think that's where the greatest cost is at this point. I think we're looking at a number of things that could be associated costs, but they're not necessarily the materials.
But so
yeah, I mean, our greatest materials purchase cost is in foundations consumables.
So when we rolled out new Calkins materials in grades 7, 8 last year during the pandemic, and it was newly prescriptive about scope and sequence and about what units could be taught in what grade and at what time. That didn't require any additional investment. I don't understand that. It was definitely new materials that were rolled out from Calkins in 7th and 8th grade last year. How did we not pay for those?
So I think you're referring to the subscription that we purchased. It was a one-time subscription because it was very specific to the pandemic. It was produced by Teachers College, and it was pandemic materials basically
to allow us to teach remotely. And so it was a one-time subscription, but it was very low cost because we had it one purchase. It was a very low cost. I think it was $17,000 for the entire purchase for all the materials. And then Joanna's team, which was what she was talking about, took that model and produced in-house so that that cost wasn't there. So it was a very low cost, and it was basically a one-time pandemic purchase so that we had the materials digitally.
Okay, thank you, Michelle.
Yep.
I think the place where we probably, and this was a little bit before my time, but where we probably incurred a great cost was through training through Literacy Collaborative. That was that's a big expense. But as Joanna said, we've really built our capacity, and we haven't paid for training, at least, I don't know, Joanna, because I don't want to misspeak, but at least recently we have not.
I have two things to bring up if I could. One is, and I hate to do this to Joanna, but instead of just saying K, I'd like us to think pre-K as well, since we have a number of BEAT programs. And if we get universal preschool for 4-year-olds, again, think about what it is that those children are being exposed to. And, do they come with a real advantage? Do we see an advantage to those children?
So Suzanne, Regina's already on top of that. She has requested to work with OTL to ensure that we actually look at our current literacy programs, the current foundations, et cetera, and to drop it down to the pre-K program. So I think that's already in the works.
Great.
And the same with investigations. We were at Clark Road the other day, and there's a teacher in pre-K who is using foundations with pre-K. And so we're going to go visit her and observe her fairly shortly, just so that we could have that kind of continuity between our pre-K going into our kindergarten.
Thank you. That's great. And then my second point really is, hats off to you, because it turns out that, believe it or not, in our educational training programs at the college level, that our teachers don't get much around reading. Hard to believe, but it's true. And so the burden is really on us, on your department, to make sure that teachers understand that very complicated problem of acquisition of reading. And so, some of the questions we're asking, again, has to do with, as you said, Joanna, there's a lot stirring up again. It almost feels like the reading wars are coming back. And, hopefully we've learned some things through these years, but still, many teachers have not had even a course on reading acquisition. And so some of it is, maybe not so much purchasing new materials as really understanding what the reading process is like.
Oh, yeah, and I think that's where we really want to leverage our coaches and our literacy specialists to help continue, because they're steeped in the new understandings and finding the spaces and places for them to be able to support educators in doing that. I think when even, I don't think any teacher prep program could provide enough coursework to help folks kind of get in there and learn about reading alone. They're covering so many things, and reading is, as we keep saying, it's an incredibly complex process. And we have to keep continuing to update our understanding. So it's what makes it exciting, and it makes it really challenging and worth doing, but a big process.
And are we using Lucy Calkin's units of writing?
So the units of study in reading and writing, those 3 units. Yep.
Those are hers. And she's come out recently apologizing for.
I don't know. If you listen to her, yeah, she has a lot written. They actually had a really powerful study you can look at on their website also about some of the data on the schools in New York. And I think it's in Georgia, who have been involved with the project, and they've had really powerful data come out on student achievement also. But yeah, I think she talks a lot about needing to take a look at some of that early reading research and bring that to bear into those sessions. So that's a transformation, which I think is I think the fact that we have folks who are willing to kind of think and revise their thinking and incorporate nuanced understanding and look at data in interesting ways is like, it makes you feel good about the field. There's no such thing as a silver bullet. If we had it, we would have deployed it a long time ago. And so we just have to recognize this is hard, and it's thoughtful, and it's nuanced, and it's exciting, and it's exhausting, and we'll just keep doing it.
And individualized, right? I mean, some students really struggle with phonemic awareness, other students struggle with comprehension, some struggle with fluency. Those are very different intervention programs for children. So,
well, not only intervention, but classroom instruction, right? Nell Duke is talking a lot about that at the University of Michigan, and Rachel Gabriel at UConn is talking about that too. So I think we want to be mindful and pay attention to a lot of those researchers too.
Yeah. Other comments? Questions, thoughts? Yes, Susan.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna. It's nice to see you. Question just about the benchmark assessment system. One of the conversations that we had a while back was that there were teachers who found it incredibly valuable and that it was really important to help them kind of pinpoint what was going on with certain readers and certain students. And we were also hearing that it's, as Leslie, as you said, it's not only is it expensive and incredibly time consuming. And there were kind of teachers who were, if I remember correctly, were sort of saying, for the students for whom this isn't the right sort of thing, it doesn't tell us a lot. We want more flexibility in terms of how if we're going to spend that one-on-one time with students, especially if they're testing, 2 grade levels ahead or whatever it is, just it's not appropriate for that student. Kind of how we think about that. Are we still doing it with all of the intensity and or are we thinking with all of the new research that's coming out? Are we sort of having a more I'm not sure what the word is, but the kind of a more targeted approach to how different learners are responding to our different sort of to our interventions?
Leslie, you want me to take this one to start, or?
Sure. I want to make sure I understand your question, Susan. Are you just asking if we're in need of different assessments to measure different things?
Well, I guess what I was hearing was that, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze with a bunch of students, and with other students, it was incredibly powerful and important and useful. And so I think what I took away from that conversation was that, having a sense of where something like the benchmark assessment system or anything is sort of the right intervention, especially for the time that we spend on it, versus other things, and to what extent are we being kind of flexible about that kind of time? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think we're always thinking about what is going to give us the best information. So, and really weighing what information we get versus the amount of time it takes to implement an assessment. And so, it's really interesting. We have, let me just say, this has been a really challenging season to conduct the BAS because we've just had issues with sub-coverage. And so it's been really interesting to hear some teachers say, hey, I'm going to do the BAS no matter what. Like, I'm going to get this done. Other teachers have really struggled with it and really felt the burn, especially not having substitutes as we would hope for. And I think the BAS has caused frustration for some. So, I think it's something we're looking at. I think one of the things to note about BAS at this point is it is really the most consistent data we have at this point. And we need to think about we just need to think about that. I think one of the things that's going to be helpful is as we are reviewing dyslexia screeners, looking at the various assessments that are out there, how they're conducted, what they measure. And so that's going to give us some information. But I think BAS has its place, especially now. And we're thinking about, we're just always thinking about what works best. And Joanne, I don't know if you want to jump in at all.
Yeah, I'll just add briefly. So the last time we gave the benchmark assessment was in December of 2019. So I feel like, one of the things that, as challenging as it was this fall, I could probably hold a contest of folks in my literacy departments, how many they actually did for trying to help out, get through that for teachers and with teachers. Some of them probably topped 80 or 100 of them. And I think, though, what we really all felt was that in order to make any kind of decision about what comes next, we had to go back to a baseline. We have students that had incredibly interrupted schooling experiences for 18 months, and we need to know where they are in a tool that we are conversant in and get really good information from, and to make meaning of that. And so I think sort of some of those larger decisions, I guess I would ask that we give ourselves permission to sort of pause and look what's coming back from that, and then make some of those adjusted decisions going forward, because we have to know, we just don't know yet. My folks did the best they could. They did an amazing job last year remotely, but it's very different doing that on a screen with a text that you're clicking versus watching how a child handles a text. And I want to honor that process right now and then think about that.
Okay. That's very helpful. And I understand, like, these times are so complicated that it's hard to get baselines at all. And I very much appreciate the sub problem. I guess what I was hearing was that for certain students, the benchmark assessment, people did not feel like the benchmark assessment system was giving them a lot of information. And so I guess and for some, again, it was enormously powerful and important. And so I guess that was really more I think there was whatever it was like stop testing and pause. People were saying, like, for those students, like, we should be doing something else with that time. We shouldn't be doing, if we knew they were 2 grade levels ahead, we shouldn't be doing that again in the spring. We should be doing something else with them. And this isn't my area, so I don't want to try to remember, but I think it was that sort of question of where is this kind of most appropriate, and to what extent are there other things we should be thinking about there as well?
Yeah,
and anyone else remember that?
I think, Susan, to Leslie's point, the state has given us a lot of guidelines on what we should be looking at with this new idea around screening students for potential dyslexia and other reading specific issues. And so I don't think there's a direct answer to your question right now until we complete the process to look at that and look at the data that we're getting. And to Leslie's point, right now, the BAS is our most consistent data across the district in any content area. And so I'm not sure that we can get to a point where we can say that, like, it's all or nothing or one or the other until we complete the process that the state's laid out for us.
Okay. Yeah, no, and it is, and I'm very mindful of how hard it is to, both keep up with all of the research as it is changing, and also be mindful that there's only so much, like, a teacher can absorb of new practice that a teacher can absorb, let alone in good times, let alone pandemic times. So I think just the system-wide implications of trying to change course too quickly can get really complicated as well. So I'm quite appreciative of that. So thank you.
And Susan, you're right. We have had this conversation, and we have some thoughts about that. Clearly, we do. And it sounds like central office does as well. But so, we'd love to hear you thinking out loud on this periodically, for sure. Helen, I'm going to take you, and then I think we're going to wind down this conversation and go to our next.
Okay, it was just in response to what Michelle said that I was a little confused. I thought we were doing the searching for a dyslexia screener and other reading problems, but you said something about what the state had laid out?
The state gives us the process to complete that. So the state has certain things so when the state wrote the guidelines, there are certain things that they're asking us to look for within the dyslexia screener that's more broad than, is this child dyslexic or not, which we can't figure out from a screener anyhow. So what I was saying was, I think to Susan's question about, how are we using BAS? I think we have to put it together as a whole package. It's not one or the other. It is not and so I think we can't answer her question. I mean, we have to take in the information she's sharing with us and the concerns she's sharing with us, but I don't think we're at a place, and to Joanna's point, we haven't used BAS in 2 years. And so now we're first coming back to a system that teachers know. We have a lot of data gathering before I think we can give a thoughtful answer to her concerns and what that she's expressed.
So just so I understand, we've been talking about, I think we put out an RFP for the screener, or what did we do?
Sorry.
I'm trying to remember what our.
No, we don't put an RFP. We have vendors that are coming in and sharing their tools with us. And we're looking at multiple prongs within those tools and comparing them and finding out what they do. Once we have that, we'll narrow it down so that we can take that system of assessment to a group of teachers, the reading specialists, the special ed teachers. And then once we do that, then we can narrow it down to some pilot teachers. So I think we are, the high consideration is the marriage of that and our current system of BAS. But I think that Susan's question cannot be answered until we do all of that research and understand the other assessment processes.
And that should be done by.
So we're a little bit with this week, with this week having the need for so many of the people that are on the team to have covered classrooms and the potential for next week. We're about 2 weeks behind what we originally thought. And so we're going to share that. We'll share that timeline back with curriculum subcommittee once we determine.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, I know this conversation could go on for hours because some of us love literacy. However, we're going to close it for now. Thank you so much for your presentations and for your insightful answers to our questions. But we're all here and we love this topic. So we will, I'm sure, revisit it down the road, we hope shortly, or anyway, after a while. Thank you. You don't have to hang around for the rest of this, but you're welcome to. We're moving on to subcommittee and liaison reports. We are a little behind schedule, so let's see what we can do with that. Helen?
So I just have 2 announcements. The capital subcommittee meeting is meeting on Tuesday, the 11th. We will be, as we discussed at our last meeting, we're going to be doing tours of both the Baker School to look at the facility and the Lincoln School starting at 4 o'clock at Baker, and then about 35 minutes there, and then 10 minutes driving time, hopefully. And then we'll be at Lincoln, and then we'll have our 20 minutes of a meeting just to discuss what it was we saw, what the needs are, etc. The other piece, on Monday, the 10th, we will be doing our legislative forum, and we're going to have a full house, guys. Actually, our representative in Congress, Jake Oshenslosh, is going to be coming and sending some of his aides. We have our new representatives, Kevin Honan and Ruth Balls are coming, along with our old our regular, our older, some of our former and present representatives. I was using the wrong adjective, sorry. And so I think it should be a great discussion. I'm really looking forward to it. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Helen.
Welcome.
Anyone else? Jennifer?
Just a quick update. We met on December 21st. The meeting was recorded. I wanted to just highlight, we had an update from the science curriculum coordinator who talked about science teaching and learning. And so I thought that was really interesting and provided a lot of information if folks want to watch the recording. And our current plan is to meet on Tuesday, January 18th at 4 p.m.
Thank you, Jennifer. Anyone else? David?
Just very quickly, I'd like to let everyone know that we are having our next policy subcommittee meeting this coming Monday, the 10th at 5 o'clock. That's going to follow the legislative gathering that Helen just referenced.
Thank you, David. Okay, we are moving to new business. Stephen, did you want to bring something up or no?
Yeah, I just want to make two quick comments. One is that I met with Alice, Brian, and Nada, who presented the petition on the climate action petition to us last month. And we agreed to continue to look into what form school committee support for coordinating environmental initiatives in the district could be. So I hope that by the next meeting, I'll have something to circulate prior to the meeting and that we could discuss, hopefully even docketed. So, and I forgot my other point, so I'll just leave it at that. Suzanne, you're muted.
Yeah, I think you're going to mention the email.
That's right. That is what I was going to mention. I also circulated the email communication schedule. I sent it to Mariah earlier, and I think I caused some confusion by doing that. I moved everyone starting next week. So since we've already voted on this, unless there are any objections, can we just move forward with implementing according to that schedule? Yeah, everyone is welcome to swap. Are there any objections or concerns? I don't think this needs to be moved, right?
No, I think we're okay. We already said.
Okay. So if anyone doesn't have access to it, just let me know and I'll send an email directly.
I would just point out that I was looking at my emails today and I have over 21,000 emails in my less than 5 years on the committee. So we do get substantial numbers of emails. I mean, those were all legit emails. Those aren't my, spams and things. So 21,000, I'm getting close to 5,000 a year. So it is a significant number. So
well, Helen, you're up.
We can only wish we all have a week where there's not many emails. Okay. Susan.
One other, sorry, I forgot to mention a liaison report. Panel 4 is meeting tomorrow. There's been so many questions in the community about various pieces of the COVID puzzle. So if folks are interested, they are meeting tomorrow from 3 to 5.
Thank you very much. Okay, we need to go back into executive session. Robin, are we just going to stay here? Or do we?
No, you have a separate link.
Oh, that's right, we do. Okay, so here's the motion to meet in executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A for the following purposes. I'll read them all, but I don't think we're actually going to use them all. But purpose 3 is to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the Brookline Educators Union, BEU, Unit A and Unit B, and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the BEU, Unit A grievances. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining and litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. And purpose 2, to conduct a collective bargaining session with the BEU Unit A hearing on grievances in case some of them come to our meeting. And purpose 7, if we get to it, to review and approve executive session minutes from the following meetings, November 22nd, 2021 and December 16th, 2021. Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Thanks, thank you. And we have to vote on that. Susan?
Yes.
Thanks. Jennifer?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. So we'll leave this meeting. We will not be coming back to open session. And I will see you on the other side. Thank you. Thank you to all of you who presented tonight and came. Thank you.
Thank you.